Hi, Surrey here. Just a quick announcement before we get started with this episode. We talk in this episode about the Spacebrains Science Fiction Film Festival. Unfortunately, because everyone got COVID, we've had to delay it and postpone it. So the previous date is no longer accurate. We now have a new date, June 18th. We have the same red carpet. We have the same selection of films. We have workshops, including filmmaker Ben Young and us. So when we get to the point where we're talking about the film festival, be aware that we were not aware that we were all going to fall terribly ill and be incapable of running the film festival. We are not in that way anymore, and it is June 18th. So remember, June 18th, Mandurah Performing Arts Centre, Film Festival. Get your tickets at our website or at the Mandurah Performing Arts Centre website.
From beyond the farthest reaches of our galaxy they come. Two brains pulsing with a strange energy. These space brains come to share their love of science fiction movies.
Hi, and welcome to Space Brains, the show where we joy watch sci-fi movies and then talk about what was good and what was great. I'm Surrey, and this is Mark.
Hiya, it's episode 80, which means we're talking about a science fiction classic. And this time it is Blade Runner, which came out in 1982. Quite an experience to live in fear, sorry. That's what it's like to live in fear. To live like a slave.
Yeah, to live like a slave. Yes, very deep.
In this episode, we'll talk about what we liked about Blade Runner, the ins and outs of narrative and film language, plus a nice deep dive into a specific piece of science that the filmmakers are proposing. This version of Blade Runner, I don't know which version you actually got your hands on, Surrey. I watched the final recut third time through. Ridley Scott's kind of watched it and liked it and edited it and put it back to, I don't know, who knows. There's so many versions of this film.
Was it called The Final Cut?
I think it was The Final Cut.
Okay, there are 7 versions.
I don't know. When I went to watch this, there's so many versions, it's hard to know which one to pick. So there's a little warning for you. I don't know which one to pick. Pick one of them. This is, I just mentioned Ridley Scott behind the camera of Blade Runner and all of those artistic decisions. Of course, we did Alien a long time ago now on Spacebrains.
Yes, and you can see the similar...
You can.
Aesthetics in this one.
You totally can. You can see Ridley Scott, and I want to talk a little bit more about Ridley Scott in tonight's episode. This story was based on Philipkdick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? What a title, writers. What a title. If you have never read that, go check it out. And the screen writers were Hampton Fancher and David Webb Peoples. So turn back now if you haven't seen this movie, and then turn back in.
This is your spoiler warning.
This is your warning.
That I was distracted for.
You were distracted by Philip K. Dick's novels.
Futurism.
Yes.
Tune back in once you have watched at least one version of this film. I watched the original theatrical release.
Okay.
That had been remastered. So which is good because I watched it in the high definition version.
Yeah.
And the other versions vary from being the original theatrical release through to the pre-release master print or whatever they call it, which was only like a test screener and was missing, say, the soundtrack and things, through to the final cut, which is where they'd kind of gotten that original master print got out, and then they said, "Oh, it's actually kind of popular." And Ridley Scott saw that and went, "No, you can't show that. That's yes, that is kind of mostly my director's cut, but it doesn't have like all of the right sound effects, the lighting. It's not a finished thing. It's rough."
Yes.
So they went, "Well, give us a director's cut." So they brought out in '92 a director's cut, and then more recently in 2000 and I want to say 2007.
Probably a remastered VHS in 1996 or something.
Yeah, there would have been like a Laserdisc version. But then there was the final cut, which is where Ridley Scott said, okay, seriously, give me all of the bits and pieces. Everyone wants to see it because it's a popular movie. He got his budget and he did it through... you could say it probably wasn't the way he originally intended in 82 because it was done 20 years later. But it's like, maybe it's like, this is the way I originally would have done it if I was as good a director then as I am now.
Yeah.
So that's it. That's the final. So once you've watched one of those versions, join us back in to discuss because we're going to go all through all of it.
Yes, definitely. And you will really see a master filmmaker at play when you watch Blade Runner, no matter which version, I think. So what was your number one takeaway from Blade Runner?
Oh, look, easy enough here. The number one takeaway here is I forgot how damn good Rutgerhauer is.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, he's brilliant.
In this film, he just absolutely pulls the rug out from underneath Harrison Ford. I mean, Harrison Ford's absolutely solid in this.
Yep.
It shows why he was so popular, in particular during the 80s, late 70s through to the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
He had like a decade of just blockbuster, amazing movies.
Yeah, after not being able to get into really mainstream movies until Star Wars, and Star Wars was just a gamble of a film anyway.
But then Rutger Hauer comes along in this film, and he plays such an interesting and nuanced android learning emotions, but also with solid military training. Like this weird combination of a serious, strong decisiveness and tactical, nous.
Yeah.
In combination with someone that doesn't know how to deal with grief or happiness or anything in between. He does. It's just I've seen quite a few Rutger Hauer films, but they have been like he's done mostly sort of B grade films after this one.
Yeah.
Like it's just I think maybe apparently he was a little bit quirky, eccentric in it, but he was Dutch.
Yeah.
You've got to expect that.
Yeah. There's the film where he's the blind man.
Yes, the Blind Justice.
Brilliant. Yeah, that is a brilliant film. That one is something from my childhood that I probably need to go back. Not Sci-Fi.
Salute to the Jugger, which is a post-apocalyptic sci-fi.
All right.
But it's a little bit B-gradish. Could have done with a bit of Ridley Scott or James Cameron.
Yeah.
Which they should have done. Would have been good. And he was in any number of other sort of films. But my number one takeaway on this is I watched it and I was watching Rutger and I was going, now I remember why I watched so many of his films in the 80s. Not just because they were in the bargain basement, bins of the rentals.
50 cents a week or whatever.
Yeah, but because in this film, he's stunning.
Yeah, he puts on a masterclass of acting. If you're an actor out there, go have a look at this because this is someone at the peak of their performance. And obviously under Ridley Scott just really delivers this complex character. Quite often... See, it's interesting because Ridley Scott publicly has said... Blade Runner was never meant to be political or deep or a thinking man's film. It was always his intention was it was like a blockbuster, like it was supposed to be a fun, entertaining romp. And I read a bit about that before watching it this time myself. And so I went in with a bit of different eyes. Like I kind of went in going, was Ridley Scott just kind of, going, hey, they gave me a really nice budget and a couple of great actors and I'm just going to have a bit of fun here. And then the irony is the film's come out and it's kind of established not only box office success, critical success, but then kind of like cult success over time. And as you were saying, the whole time he was like, it's not quite polished the way I would have done it. And then 10 years later, they're like, yeah, sure, you have some more money and polish it up because it was still selling, and it had that following. So it's a film that any
what you're saying though is Ridley Scott failed in this film.
Yeah, because he made such a more complex film than I think his intention.
He made a classic.
Yeah, well, but maybe that's how you make a classic. Like your intention shouldn't be, I'm going to make a classic.
I think it's too hard to do that.
It's like, but I mean, in saying that, and I want to come back to this later, but you look at the cinematography, you look at that acting, like you look at that subtext that's going on with Rutger, you look at even how Harrison delivers his character. they're all kind of standalone masterpieces in a way. You know, there's so many aspects of this film that is a masterpiece. Like, and so many other times you watch a film, you're like, wow, the production design, especially in sci-fi, like the productions, like the special effects are phenomenal, but, you know, maybe bits of the story needed a little bit more editing or a bit of tweaking, or, you know, the actors weren't quite present or complex enough, but the way they showed us the future was incredible. But this is a film where sort of each of those lines are just that peak grade material. And it's a real pleasure to watch this, especially the version I watched this time. I really enjoyed.
Yes, there's likewise. I have to say, so this is, it's got a lot going in there. You've just mentioned a whole bunch of stuff, but we like to ask the question, is it hope, warning, or experiment?
Yeah, it's a hard one, this, I reckon. I did have trouble answering, and I'd love to know your thoughts out there in podcast ear listening land. I'm going a warning, and the reason is pretty simple, that if you break the story down to inventing robots, it's the old story, isn't it? Like inventing robots, and then they get too sophisticated for us as the inventors, and then we don't realize the kind of consequences of them developing that extra level of sophistication. Like what happens when they kind of think like humans, and that's what, you know, Rutgerhauer's character and the others were basically thinking. They came to Earth because they're like, you gave us a life expectancy of 4 years. We don't want that. We want to live longer than 4 years. And so I think it's just the good old robotics getting too far ahead of us. We saw it in our last episode. If you want to go back and look at the machine, you know, that was again a similar kind of theme, wasn't it? That idea of robotics intelligence pushing to that next level and the consequences. And I think that's what this film kind of suggests. I think also a warning, the other reason for warning is because it is a bit of it's not Mad Max dystopian world, this world, but it is a pretty broken society that we're seeing. And, you know, some people have left Earth and they've left rubbish behind sort of idea. like it doesn't look like that pleasant of a place. And that's what's so good about Deckard, Harrison Ford's character, is he's kind of moping around in this city like, ugh. like a teenager going, this place is kind of crap, right? Like, but it's what we've got, you know? And even at the end, it's not an upbeat ending, you know, it's an ending of like, oh, okay, well, we got to kind of keep running, you know? Like,
well, this is where we're going to have to discuss about the different versions of this film.
Yeah, I know, that's the thing, right? But anyway, we'll come back to the ending later, but I think warning. What do you guys think out there?
That's a bit of a retelling of Frankenstein's story, basically. Sort of the same warning there about creating idea, life and the life getting bigger. I would almost sort of go that this is. I don't really think it's hinting towards hope.
No, see, I think
because
hope
there's none of this sort of science overcoming adversity. But experiment, I was thinking, on the other hand, is we're examining this idea. So what if you have a person with only emotion but no memory? Does that work?
Yeah, right.
What if you have a person that has memory and emotion but they're not human? You know, how does that make them human or not? Like, so there's this question of what elements make up a person to be considered human.
Yeah, and that's really the start, right? Like that question, or that questioning that the Blade Runners do to the robots to find out if they are a robot, because they look so much like humans. The robotics has gotten to a point that you can't see the difference. And that's kind of at the start of that grilling of those questions, isn't it? And the way that he fails that test is by illuminating that he is a robot in how he answers those questions. A human would answer them slightly different.
Yes.
And which, again, we saw last week, didn't it? It's a very similar sort of thing
that was
on.
Instead of a Voight camp, it was just the classic Turing test.
Yeah, yeah.
And he didn't shoot the robot when it failed. He was trying to make it pass.
Well, the robot shot Holden, right? Like,
and I suppose that's an interesting contrast. Is that the Voight Kampf test is to discover the robot.
Yeah.
The Turing test is to try to teach a robot to be more indistinguishable from human. Well, here we're trying to distinguish them. We're trying to see that they aren't human.
Yeah.
Oh, well, okay, so this isn't the first time you've seen this film.
No, I mean, like a lot of people, probably seen this a few times. I would have seen it at some point in the 80s, like an awful TV cut, on Australian television with ads, really dark on a really crappy television. We had a really crappy television as kids. Then I reckon I saw the theatrical version maybe on VHS at a slumber party thing when I was like a teenager. But again, that was pretty bad quality, like everything felt very dark. And then when I went to, which I've mentioned a few times on the podcast, like when I went to sort of film school, film studies at uni, Blade Runner was one of those films that was brought up. It's actually in the main textbook for all film students across the world, which is Film Art, Bordwell and Thompson. The main reason why they use it as an example is the lighting. So they talk about the lighting. We'll come back to that. So it's like one of the best examples of lighting. And I agree with that. But I remember watching it in those uni, whatever it was, first year, second year uni, and kind of going, I feel like I'm a bit out of the loop of this film. Like I feel like I'm missing it because I had other people at film school. I had friends that used to quote this film. And I'd be like, I don't know. It's not quite tickling me. And then I watched it again maybe 10 years ago. And again, I wasn't super charged by it. Like, I wasn't super excited by it. So when we decided to watch it for Spacebrains, I was kind of like, yeah. It's definitely a classic because so much of society, the film world, the critics, I mean, like we were just saying at the start, I mean, most directors don't get another chance to put out the film, a director's cut. Most directors don't get a third chance to revamp it and repolish it and be given funds to redo
I bet most directors would like to do that.
Most directors probably would like to do it, or some version of that maybe. And that's not just because it's Ridley Scott, he's made a big career of being a director, but it's literally this film dictates that, right? Like there's a need there for it as people wanting more. It's like Star Wars, like people want more from the Star Wars world. So there's a demand.
And they finally have made a sequel to this film.
They have, yeah.
Which I guess we'll cover in some future episode.
Yeah.
It's not, we haven't got a plan for it yet, but I can see it coming along. I'm hesitant to see it. I'm always hesitant to see sequels because often, or remakes, because often what happens is it gets taken. The sequel requirement comes from the executive producing, money-making designer.
Sometimes the money, right?
They'll go, and rarely does it come from a director or writer going, artistically, there is more to tell.
Yes.
And so I really must tell more about this. It's usually, people like Blade Runner. Let's get some of these young, fancy, handsome stars in there, and
let's make it a bit more fun, hey?
We'll try to capture more audience because the original Blade Runner, when it was released theatrically, it was up against like some stiff competition with like E.T. and what else was going? E.T. and Tron and
1982.
But it was coming out the same weekend as those movies, so it didn't have a spectacular box office hit.
Yeah.
But
it's a slow burner. Yeah,
but after some time, people started seeing it, and particularly when it went out to video, they couldn't sell enough copies.
Yeah.
And so that's why they went, oh, geez, okay, let's get this back out there. And so they did a second cinema release of it.
Yeah.
And then they did the 92, director's cut release of it. And then so as I said, there's 7 different versions of this film.
Yeah, so, I mean, this time round, I really did enjoy it. I don't know if it was the version I watched. I don't think it was, looking online, it's not like it's heavily different to the other versions I've looked at.
No, it's not.
I did, as I said before, came in probably eyes a bit more open, like, I don't love this film, but I'll just look at it. And I did, knowing that Ridley Scott maybe had more of just an entertainment value, and me looking at it and going, I really appreciate what he's done there, and I really like that, and that lighting is getting me, and there's lots of little motives in this film, and we'll come back to that as well, and I liked that, and I don't know, I enjoyed this viewing so much more than I've had on probably 5 other viewings of this film.
My experience is almost the same, minus the film school bit.
Yeah.
So I watched this the first time on a bad VHS tape in the 80s sometime. So, I'm not super old at that point. I'm guessing I would have been 12-ish. And I found it, as a 12-year-old, it's pretty freaking boring.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a 12-year-old's movie.
No.
Which is the problem, because most movies released today are 12-year-olds movies. Because that's where the money is, right? So this didn't really thrill me. But in 92, so I was an older teenager, still probably interested more in flashy. In '92, what I'm coming through, like Terminator 2.
Yeah.
And I'd seen Predator and RoboCop and Total Recall, and then I'm seeing this movie, director's cut. And again, I was kind of like, I'm okay, yeah. And so that was the last time I saw it. I hadn't seen it since. So that's, I don't want to do the calculations, like 30 years ago.
Yep.
Almost exactly 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I am an old man. Yes, when 900 you reach, not so good will you look.
So it makes this, actually, it makes this 40, it's the 40th anniversary.
40th anniversary.
It's our 80th episode, and it's the 40th anniversary
so
of
I watched this, a few days ago.
Yeah.
But I put on the Spacebrains goggles.
Yeah.
And that's why we talk about joy watching here. You're going to go into these films, even if you had bad things or good things, whatever you go, you go in to joy watch. The idea is just like if you were hypothetically handed the keys to a car and pointed to a paddock or a racetrack, and then someone says, look, just go nuts. And you go, oh, sweet, I get to ride a car as fast as I can around a racetrack.
Yep.
If you came and found a Ferrari, you're going to be pretty excited.
Yep.
If you came out and found an old Datsun Cortina, you're still going to be pretty excited. You go, so I can just thrash this as hard as I like, right? Yeah. Sweet.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. So you come into these movies with that same attitude of like, I'm going to enjoy the science fiction out of this, even if the most enjoyable part of this movie is simply the lighting or the fact that they hit the inciting incident right on 12 minutes and it was a compelling inciting incident. If everything else is rubbish, that's what I'm going to get out of this. And so I went into this film like that. I thought, I'm going to get something out of this.
Yeah.
I was immediately blown away.
Yeah.
I was looking at the special effects. I went, because I got the high definition version out. And as I said, my previous viewing, I saw a cinema release of it, but I was probably a bit more interested in more explosions and gunshots.
Yeah.
And prior to that, and I was also still remembering the old VHS, which was only a few years earlier that I'd seen it.
Yeah.
And so watching this one the other night, high definition, I was looking at this world and I thought to myself, okay, even before any actors appeared on screen, was in that opening images, I went, this is really good.
Yeah. That opening city shot is an amazing
and
shot.
It was just like the idea of having the gas burn-offs in the midst of the city sprawl.
Yeah.
Which kind of you're going, is that because they're drilling oil there, or is that because it's rotting so much underneath that they've got to take these rotting gases, which I'm thinking is the idea, and burn them off up in the atmosphere because that's all they can do with them. There's just too much of it.
Yeah.
And I got totally sucked in. Then I started looking at paying attention to things like, as you said, the lighting in it is just gorgeous. And then I was looking at, okay, well, how's the acting going in this? How's old Harrison Ford looking? Because he's looking young in this one.
Yeah.
And through, and then I started looking at, the more philosophical points raised in this regarding, identity.
Yeah.
And through the whole movie, I was thinking, I don't know what I was thinking before. This is actually a really good movie.
Yeah.
It's like,
and Surrey's saying something that I hadn't even thought of, but I think subconsciously that's exactly how I sat through this, was that joy watching idea. And I just came in with, I guess, not an expectation that I thought I was going to like it. And I got to say, like, that opening shot, the city, the gas station, burning stuff, whatever, fumes, whatever, the flying car that comes past, and then you start just slowly migrating into that cityscape and thinking that city's not been done with computers. It's been done with matte painting, and this is practical, props and all that. And apparently that Tyrell pyramid was actually 9 feet tall in real life. Like, that's how big of a model they built, And it's just, you take that in, and the fact that then they had those giant signs and the flying cars, and it's something that Ridley Scott is quite known to do, which is that moody landscape. In his sci-fi films and his non-sci-fi films, he does a lot of those huge landscape shots that are very moody, and that opening shot of Blade Runner is very moody.
Yes.
And it pulled me in, sucked me in. What was your favourite scene?
I think my favourite scene is Rutgerhauer doing his famous monologue, which...
It's a good monologue.
We should have included that launch party. That's a good one. So that, famously, he ad-libbed portions of it.
Yeah.
So the original obviously included glittering sea beams and the Tannhauser Gate and that sort of thing. He ad-libbed the finishing of it. So he's obviously done multiple takes, and he's done the original a couple of times, the real as it was written. But Rutger's an artist, and as I said, that's he's known to be a little bit quirky here and there, and he puts his own energy into his characters.
Ridley, I want one more take.
One says, I'll need another take. so he did that. He did that take, and he's sitting there looking like he's got the expression on his face like a lost little child, which is what he is. He's 4 years old. I mean, and of that 4 years, it's only like the past couple of years that he's had anything resembling emotions. And he sits there and talks about these amazing things, and he ends up with saying, and all that will be lost. Yeah. And that was kind of meant to be where it's meant to be, and all that will be lost. Yeah. But then he adds that whole, like tears in the rain. And evidently that was just an on-the-spot decision because they were covering him with water, and he was in a, sad acting state. He was acting sad and fully into it. And he added that in there, and just the delivery of that, and they kept that in there because his delivery was just perfect. Yeah. And when you watch it and you hear it, if you're really in it, you get yourself in that moment. It is very touching and sad, and you think, like he's talked about essentially quite horrible things like warfare and explosions, and I don't know what a C-beam is, but it glitters, presumably because he was a military unit. Yeah. And he's killed a lot of people. As he mentions at some point in this film, he's done some terrible, terrible things. Obviously I'm not a good actor, so you would have all been crying by now if I was. Goosebumps and everything. But he sits there and he says all these things, but he says it like it's an amazing and magnificent sort of thing. Not a good thing, he said, but it is something that is spectacular and momentous and moving and important, and yet it's going to be lost. Yeah. Because it's only been replicants doing that. Yeah. And him in particular, he's gotten down there and it's done. Yes. And you can't help but feel that sense of loss with it, and that, like tears in the rain, with the rain pouring on him, and the way he delivers it, it really touched me. Yeah, well, it's quite a metaphor, that, isn't it? Because, and I liked you just describing him like he is a 4-year-old child, so it's almost like he's realizing at that moment of death, what he's realizing is so much more profound than us humans. Like, us humans are going, just kill them all. Like, just destroy them all. You're not even trying to think through what could we actually gain from this? Like, what could we do? It's the fear factor again as a human, isn't it? And even with Tyrell, when he visits him, that scene's I loved that scene because he says, like, he's trying to, like, almost cuddle up to Tyrell. You're the maker. You're the father. And he goes, no. Like, I can't fix you, I can't do it. And aren't you a beautiful killing machine? And so therefore he goes, yeah, okay, I'm a killing machine. I'll kill you, father, basically. And I thought that scene was a really amazing scene because he was even then more mature than the humans. And then right at the end, it's the same thing. Like, he's trying to kill Deckard, Harrison Ford, but he doesn't. He saves him. And you see him thinking that through. That's why the acting is so powerful from him in particular, is you can see there's stuff going on behind his eyeballs, can't you? Yeah. Which is very human, but he's not human. So as us, as the audience, you're really compelled to love his version of that character. And he just the scope he delivers throughout this film, he goes from sort of almost like logical machine, absolute badass villain that you've ever seen, and then kind of emotional reasoning and childlike behaviour as well. So he does the whole gamma ray of emotions throughout this film. He must have been exhausted. The whole C-beam, you mean? Yeah. He must have been exhausted. It's kind of, you see these films where actors do this and they come back around where, maybe afterwards they're not quite there the same way as they were before the filming. I don't know. It was a very moving piece, and it's full of, this whole film is full of, these quite suddenly intense moments, but there's also a whole lot of science in all of this. Science fiction, which is great. That's a whole world full.
Yeah, it's a world building.
Was there some part of that science fiction that particularly caught your attention?
I liked that Tyrell, made Rachel. So I guess she was like an assistant or something, right? And then he made her as a robot, implanted the memories. She thinks she's human.
Yeah.
So I just thought that's a really cool concept, isn't it? Like that itself could be a film. Like a person questioning whether they are a robot or not.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, you could almost have put that subtext into this film.
Yeah.
And had, Deckard question whether he was a robot or not.
That's right. Yeah, totally. And that's what I've felt like before. But yeah, like it was that kind of whole concept of just that bit, like that, like he got tested on her, and she thinks she's human. So she's not treating, because we've seen already Leon do the test and how he reacted, but then now she's not reacting that same way. And then it's a nice bit of kind of, it's a nice character development that then she comes to Deckard's apartment after that and kind of is like, yeah, but I'm not a robot, right? Like, I'm not. And he's like, no, you are.
Yeah.
And she's like, no. And he doesn't even have to say anything. And she's like, holy shit, I'm a robot. And she kind of storms off, right? And then even later, she's the B story of this film. And I thought it was a really cool B story. Then even later, there's that whole scene where after she saves him, that they kind of have a really intimate moment. And so very human-like, he kind of makes a move to her. Now, unlike a robot, more like a human, she doesn't want that.
Yeah.
Because of all the pain and anguish she's going through. So I just thought that actual development was a really cool sci-fi development. It's like, could you imagine? I mean, and I suppose it was setting up Tyrell that he wasn't necessarily like this ethical maker of these machines, was he?
No, and I think you could tell that from the point where he said, we've developed these machines to the point, the Nexus 6 is so advanced that it starts to develop its own form of emotion.
Yeah.
Oh, what are you going to do about that? Oh, well, we just kill them early. And it's like, that's really, I mean, yeah, they're robots that you created for work.
Yeah.
So it's one of these blurry lines is if you get them fresh off the production line and then you chuck them straight in a vat of acid and melt them back down again to components to rebuild. Yeah, you're sort of going, okay, well, that's definitely, you haven't killed a person.
Yeah.
You just destroyed a piece of equipment. But then there's some grey area between the point where they come off the production line through to the 4-year mark. Somewhere in there, they're starting to move into that. They're not just sentient, because people often talk about, like, the definition of sentient is able to perceive.
Yes.
Okay, so pretty much everything is sentient to some degree. And that alone is insufficient argument for morality. It's a very strong argument, but it's insufficient for the completeness.
Yeah.
You want to move into sapience, self-awareness, because once you start talking about something is more so than simply able to experience pain. I mean, a plant reacts to damage in a way that you could say is experiencing pain. But even the most committed vegan still eats plants. Yeah. Because there is obviously a line that they draw somewhere morally and say, yeah, that sort of pain is not enough of an argument to stop me.
Yep.
But then obviously a vegan, for example, has drawn that line to say if it's an animal then I don't do it.
Yep.
Whereas various omnivores have it slightly further along, and some people won't eat dog because they have too much empathy with dogs.
Yeah.
Some people do eat dogs because for them it's just another animal. I mean, why not?
Yeah.
All the way up to, obviously, there are, most people draw a line at humans.
Yeah.
Some people, and there are people who draw a line, like, say, primates, chimps and gorillas.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be eating a monkey or an ape. But then there's also people who do eat monkeys and apes for various reasons.
Yeah.
And then there's people who eat people.
Yeah.
And, we call them psychopaths. And, not always the case. There's ritual versions of it.
Yeah, there's ritual stuff.
And there's cultural stuff which kind of blurs the line a bit.
Yeah.
But anyway, we all have this line, and a robot that dies at 4 years, Tyrell he's arbitrarily said, 4 years, and this is regardless of any other testing or any other signs or symptoms, at 4 years I've determined that they are still machine enough to be terminated without prejudice.
Yeah.
After that, they would be too human.
Mm.
And that's basically what he said.
Yeah.
But in this movie, we see this range of, like, Leon is probably the least advanced.
Yeah.
He's still the most childlike. In fact, in his testing that he does, he almost comes across as someone who's autistic.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you're in a desert. Oh, which one? What?
Yeah.
You know, yeah, it's a hypothetical. What do you mean? Yeah. So, whereas through to Pris and Roy are the most advanced emotional.
Yeah.
But even they're only just like Roy's only just on the burgeoning threshold of being complete.
Yeah. But they give him those little quirks, don't they? So, like, Roy goes, what I mentioned before, that emotional arc. He goes through an arc. He's also obviously having some sort of relationship with Pris. So that itself is different, isn't it? It's not like two machines, like in a factory.
Yeah, no.
They've developed some sort of feelings for each other. And then Leon has his photos as well. So that again is like, it's like there's a character trait there, isn't it? Like he's taking photos, storing photos, like that's human. That's someone having an experience. So
because he wants memories.
Yeah, he's trying to gather those memories, and so it's a very interesting one. And let us know what you think about the science, because this film is chock block full of sci-fi. Superficially present, flying cars, off-world travel, military exploration, robotics, AI. But at its heart, it probably is, like you mentioned before, a bit of a metaphor, like the Frankenstein story. It could be the same story, almost replicated a little bit, but then put in this futuristic world. So let us know what you thought about some of that sci-fi. I think we should quickly touch on, by the time you are listening to this episode, we would have put on our inaugural Spacebrains Science Fiction Film Festival.
Yes. So, well, I'll just pretend we have. Gee, that was a great day.
That was a fantastic day. What a day.
Gee, man, it started at 11 o'clock, and when we had these workshops with, award-winning directors of, Netflix films and TV shows and Hollywood movies.
Published
authors and scientists and
science fiction
the
experts.
Most awesome podcasters.
Yeah, in the world that you're listening to right now.
Yes.
Putting on a display of podcasting prowess and, like a red carpet event, glorified live on the internet, maybe. Maybe. But again, this is past tense.
Past tense, yeah. Oh, yes.
So it could happen. Or it did happen.
It could have did happen, maybe.
Maybe it happened. Maybe it's available now on the internet.
Maybe instead of listening to us, you can watch both.
Yeah, you could do both.
Anyway,
yeah.
So we've got the film selections went out, so you're going to know what's going to be screening.
And wasn't there some crackers in there? Sorry.
There are some. It ranges from the rather startling to the exciting to the sweet.
To the funny.
To the funny.
To the scary.
To the scary, yeah.
And, there's animation in there. There's, like what we're talking about here with Blade Runner, kind of dystopian futures. And then there's real emotional arc ones, like based, true emotional arcs.
We've got computers and cloning and robots.
Oh, yes, so many different science fiction elements. Plus, a couple of the films are student films, and they just still blew our socks off. Unbelievable that students have made it. There's also, quite a few local West Australian films in there. There's a couple of Australian films from, I think, Sydney.
We've got a couple music videos. It's not a music video film festival.
No.
But we've got a couple of them. Well, I think we've got 4 in total, but we chose 2, which were just really cool.
Yeah, and they're very sci-fi.
Very interesting, and so they're going to feature there as well.
Yeah, that'll be part of it.
So if you're in the Terra adapters or the MCP...
Well done.
Control?
You got screened earlier today.
Your videos were just amazing on screen today.
As long as everything goes well, which it would have earlier today.
Yes.
It did go excellently. Yes. So, if you came to the festival, let us know. Hit us up on our socials. hashtag us, get us involved. Let us know.
Watch the videos, see if you can see yourself.
That's right. You might be out there.
Share it.
Okay, so let's get into some details about Blade Runner, the 1982 version, and why it is considered a classic. We've just gone through some of the kind of original starting points of where Surrey and I sit and what we've seen about Blade Runner in previous times. So we mentioned Ridley Scott, champion filmmaker. You know, he's someone that's been in the Hollywood system now 40 years. We did an earlier episode, another classic, Alien. If you haven't seen Alien, go watch it, listen to the podcast. This was a pretty similar time, wasn't it, that Blade Runner only came out a couple of years after Alien, and it was based on the Philipkdick novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and the screenplay credits go to Hampton Fancher and David Peoples. Harrison Ford, we mentioned, plays the Rick Deckard. Rutgerhauer plays Roy Batty. Seanyoung plays that robot Rachel. edwardjamesolmos plays Gaff. I liked Gaff. You like Gaff, the other police officer?
Well, he's the origami man. And
Yeah.
if you've seen what's it? I Am Mother.
I Am Mother, yeah.
Because there's another film out now called Android Mother or Mother Android or something. No, I Am Mother by Western Australia's own Grant Spittori. Grant included in I Am Mother the use of origami with robots and the little origami message left behind to indicate a visitation. And Gaff is famous for that, and that's where some I want to say controversy is thrown up between these different versions of these films.
Yes, okay. We'll come back to that controversy a little bit later. Controversy's good. Stick around. We'll reveal some controversy. Daryl Hannah, as well as in there, plays Pris. William Sands plays that JF Sebastian. It was filmed in California, had a budget of $6 million. Not a bad budget for 1982. Probably could be a little bit bigger
It was
for Ridley,
still a bit
but
smallish.
still healthy.
Like when you take into account that Star Wars was 30 mil,
Yeah, right.
which was at the time
Huge.
seemingly huge.
Yeah. But it did do a return of $40 million at the box office. So that's not too bad. That's not too bad at all. And that doesn't even take into account, the global ongoing sales of all those other versions that have come out since.
There's a new role-playing game that got kick-started just the other day
Yeah.
and was funded within minutes.
So I think this is the thing. I think it's probably done 10 times that kind of amount of money. And Warner Brothers is the company behind this film. It's a stayer. It's something that they can kind of keep going back to. You mentioned that sequel. Ridley Scott was kind of in line to do a sequel around 2003, 2004, sometime around then. The same screenplay writers came back and they had another idea. Then that kind of got scrapped. It had some funds for a while and then Ridley wasn't interested. And it went through a couple of different hands, a couple of different directors for a while there before they sort of settled on where they got to that sequel in I think it was 2017, something like that came out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll probably have a look at it in a future episode. So, anyway, with narrative, we're going to break down the main narrative plus talk about some of those film aspect parts of this film. We like to break down the narrative into that good old-fashioned 3-act structure that you will find most films, novels play into. This is based on a lot of the script writing teachers that you can find yourself, Campbell, Schneider, McKee, not McPhee, and Field, but there's plenty more out there that still talk about this 3-act structure. What is the first act about, sorry?
The first act is all about introductions, and it's about setting the scene and getting us into the story itself, which is very important.
Of course.
Because there are films that
Don't do
don't
that.
seem to get to that point where they hook you.
Yeah.
And so we have an opening image which will establish the world we're in.
And we talked already a bit about that
and
for this one.
We meet the characters. We get a bit of a conversation, and something about the theme of the film is brought up. We have
Sense of the character.
we have some problems raised, some initial starting conditions.
So in Die Hard, Bruce Willis is come to town to try to, win back his wife
Yes.
before they get divorced, right? So that's kind of set up.
Fortunately, lucky in that case there, it's really not what the movie's about.
No.
That wouldn't have been so good with all those teenage boys otherwise. No, that really wouldn't have been. But anyway, we have the catalyst, which is an important part of Act 1. So once we've set everything up, we've got to have some action or incident called the inciting incident or action. I think it's the question that we want answered in Act 2.
Yep.
And it's, it's what lets us know what this film is going to be about. And that's what I mean. That's like the hook. That's where you could go, oh, okay, I see where this is going. Settle in. Let's see how it rolls out.
Yep, get the bag of popcorn and let's go.
But of course, we always have to have a little bit of a debate because, I mean, if you don't do it, like, let's put it this way. If you had in Blade Runner, he gets arrested and taken and told there's fugitives he's got to hunt down. Okay, so now here we go. Oh, okay. Now we know what this movie's going.
Yeah.
If he just went, yep, sure, done. And he's in there hunting down the fugitives. And I've seen movies that do this kind of thing. It feels cheaty or too quick or easy or like, what's the catch? So instead you've got to have this thing called the debate. The main character or not necessarily the main character personally, but the story must have this question. Okay, it could go this way or it could go that way. Which way is it going to go and why does it go into the rest of the film? And that establishes this narrative drive. You understand why we're going there and why that decision was made and the fact it was a decision to do it.
Yeah.
It wasn't just watching a roller coaster ride. You're actually on the roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
And that takes us to Act 2.
Yeah, and I mean, you're exactly right there, and really the character needs to drive us into Act 2 by that debate and their decision. So sometimes the world changes a little bit, but in a really good story, the character is deciding to take that journey, and that is Act 2. So that's what drives us on with the story. So that's where we get a section that a lot of people call the fun and games or the complications rising, the stakes are raised. Quite often this first bit of Act 2 is kind of like the trailer. So it is the bits that, in this case, Blade Runner, you're going to have Harrison Ford running around a city, futuristic gun, futuristic cars and weapons. Maybe you're going to have a girl in a bikini with a snake being chased down the road,
Yes.
That's the fun and games, and maybe you're going to have like questioning robotics and not robotics, and you're going to have rutgerhauer, like tackling someone and pulling someone's eyes out. And, these are going to be the Act 2 fun bit of the film, because the setup, like Surrey said, the inciting minute, the decision is, we've got these 4 replicants, robots loose in a city, and you're the only one that can hunt them down to save the day. So now we've got to have Harrison hunt them down. So that's the fun and games, and that shouldn't be easy, and it's not easy for him. So that's what makes this interesting, and you want to watch on. So there is complications. What is something that is really great as a complication in this is that the robots or the replicants are so powerful that Harrison Ford is not like Arnie, where he's up against ones and he's a super strong guy. It's like, no, these robots will kill you.
Oh, yeah. They're military robots.
Yeah, but they're also just so much more powerful. It is like fighting the Terminator. So you can't just expect to go up to them. And so what I loved in this is that he just kind of pulls out the gun and he's just going to fire on them no matter where he is, because it's literally the only way to take them down. And they say that very early back in Act 1, that the only way to take them down is to kill them. Shoot them dead, I think is the phrase. Shoot them dead. Don't just shoot them.
Better to be a killer than a victim.
That's right. That takes us through to that midpoint. Now, the midpoint, maybe things don't go so smooth for our old main character. So he's hunting them and things just don't quite work out. And so a midpoint is that. It tends to be that now you've had a bit of fun hunting these replicants, but it's not going to all be working out so easily for you. And likewise, in any film or story, the midpoint, they've been on this journey that they were really pushing. Something needs to not quite go according to plan. And in fact, now we head into like a bit of territory, which is actually your plan is falling apart. Things are turning to shit. People are dying, or things are dying around you. Your plan actually doesn't work. So scrap it, throw it out. You need to come up with a new plan, or else you will die. And in other stories, maybe Blade Runner is an example where, the risk of him dying became higher and higher. But in other stories, it might also be that it's the death of an idea. You know, like the plan didn't work, the dream job doesn't work out, or
winning the finals.
winning the final, you know, game, and then not actually making it to the finals. And now you're being disqualified, in fact. So, but the whole point of the movie was that we were going to get there and win the gold. Yeah, no, you can't be in the gold medal game. So now what, right? So that's the point that gets us to that point. And those characters are sitting on the side of the road. It's raining heavily, as rutgerhauer would say. You know, tears coming down my cheek. And whatever.
He said it much better, though. You know?
He says it much better, you know, and I'm not trying to be as good as him at the moment. But, yeah, you're sitting there in the rain and you've got no money and your team's all lost and you've been disqualified. You've been kicked out of the job. Now what?
Yes.
And in that moment, what makes a great film is the character goes, do you know what? Let's try, bam, Act 3.
Let's try Act 3, which, of course, is where they gear up. They get their inspiration clue or sudden drive, motivation.
Sometimes it's a connection back to the start.
Sometimes, yeah, and then they go on and it doesn't quite work.
Yeah.
It never quite works the way they always wanted
The
to.
first hurdle.
Again, you got to think, what if you watched a film where the guy says, so I've got to defeat this man of steel that is impervious to all bullets. And you go, well, I'll make a kryptonite bullet and shoot him in the head. Yeah. And then the very next thing, he goes out and shoots Superman in the, or, you know, like, the evil Superman in the head.
Credits.
Dunk. And there's celebration and everyone walks home and you're like, oh.
Yeah, is that it?
Why didn't you just do it at the start?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it always has to fail. That initial plan always has to fail. And they've got to trust the Force. You know, they do the first pass on the exhaust ports on the, you know, Battlestar, whatever. It's Death Star, not Battlestar Galactica. Yeah. The Death Star, I've got too much sci-fi on my brain. Then on the Death Star, it fails to go in there. And then it's small, it's impossible. Use the Force, Luke. Yeah. Okay, so now that's where we have to have some reversal, some new learning. And obviously the Force is a good one. And
Neo is a good one as well.
Neo's a good one.
See the bullets.
He can now
see the
Matrix. Yeah. And then they get the actual victory.
Yeah.
And then we have this closing image. So it's nice to have that actual victory. You know, it can be give up or down a little bit depending on the theme of the movie. And then we have some closing image where it's like, in contrast to the beginning, this is how everything is now. Things have changed in some fashion.
Which there is a nice bookend for this of Deckard, I reckon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, and regardless of which version you see, there is a large portion of it is still the same.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's the end of Act 3. So we'll get into how this movie falls into these acts.
Yeah.
And how it breaks down.
Yeah, so just want to talk a couple of stylistic things and then we'll jump into the actual plot. So with Ridley, we said those moody landscape shots. There are plenty in this. There's so many of those like shots of the city. The opening, slow dolly into the city, and you have those burning things, and you have the flying car. That comes
the eye
by,
reflecting the flames.
Yeah,
yes.
you know, like it's a very depressing looking place, isn't it? It's not, even though it's sort of sophisticated, it's also quite broken looking.
But it is very vibrant, though. There's people everywhere. There's noise and movement and light.
Yeah.
But so it's like humanity's still pushing forward.
It is.
But it's just not in a good spot.
Yeah, it's just not in a great spot. Yeah, that's a good one. So that's the other thing. And what we start to see straight away, and this is what opens the film then, is lights play a really important role. So it's all neon lights. It's all dark shadows, this film. We don't see sunlight.
Hard spotlights.
Yeah, there's no sunlight
shadows.
in this film, right? Like it's all neon lights and hard lights on people. We also have fans. We have like imposing fans. And so it opens up, and Holden, this man in a suit, is about to interrogate Leon. Leon walks in, he sits down. I had an IQ test, and he's, we're going to do this other one. He brings up this lights. No one seems very happy. Holden lights a cigarette.
Aren't there a lot of cigarettes in this?
Yeah, the eye scan comes out. The fan is like circulating really heavily in the shot, which is the whole point there. It's the same when you go back to a really classic film, not sci-fi, but Citizen Kane, which is one of those films that people say it's like the best film ever. One thing Orson Welles did with that was he was sort of the first person to really bring ceilings into the shot, right? And so they do that in Citizen Kane, and it made it all feel like tight. And I think that's what Ridley Scott's doing here. Is like the fan in the roof, like you're feeling like, is that going to chop someone's head off?
Invariably, you get that.
And the light
feels
flickers.
oppressive, and there's a fan just there, just shoop, 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 and I know it adds this real feeling to it. Like if you took that up higher and added a smaller, lighter fan, and you didn't have that noise, you would go, oh, it's
just a fan.
It's nice.
Yeah.
It's a nice additive, And
it's one of those things, like, we won't go into this much detail for the whole film, but it's one of those things that they're noticed fans all throughout the film. Like later when the sergeant or whatever, the guy running the cop station, like in his office, he's got like 3 little shitty desk fans, really like pumping air. You can really see them, and it's so that's what I want to say. Like there's all these fans everywhere. And so you got to question when you see a filmmaker's done that, like, how is that making you feel? What's that? What's the kind of gut feeling you're getting? Like you're just saying oppressive. Like, why are we getting that? It's making the light flicker constantly, which is sort of annoying, right? But then that's the point, right? Like that we're getting, the characters are kind of being shadow, light. Like it's annoying, right? Whereas in other films, like, no, light them all perfectly, natural colors, all this. So why is he doing this? It's giving us this weird world.
A wonderful, study in the setting of scenes. So scenes that really stay with you. If you go watch any movies, you'll come across some where a particular scene really sticks with you, or a particular sequence of scenes. And watch any of our classics that we've done, and you'll get this.
You'll get moments.
And what you'll find is that you pause it and have a look at everything that's included in focus in that scene.
Yeah.
It's there for a reason, and it tells part of the story.
For sure.
And this is where I suppose, when you're beginning filmmaking and you don't have the budget to spend the amount of time and props and everything, it's very hard to do. But when you do have a $6 million budget or what have you, and you've got that time and the vision, and Ridley Scott's renowned for having a meticulous vision of how he does things. Like the movie Alien was basically a graphic novel in storyboards. Before he even started shooting, and they were detailed. And you get this here. So when you see a light switch on the wall that's in it, it's visible, it's in focus. It's because that the director wants you to know there's a light switch. Either it means maybe it looks to be in the on position, but it's dark. Okay, something's broken. Maybe it's going to be used later on. Maybe there's a fan there. Why is the fan being shown? I know. This movie is full of that. Like, if you want to know how to make a scene really tick. Well, first of all, get yourself some money. Second,
no, you can do it without the money.
You can do a lot without money. You got to make sure you choose what scenes you're trying to do. If you're trying to do a Blade Runner scene, you're going to struggle because it relies on detail.
It does.
But you can certainly, if you do like a normal office scene, like that movie Office Space, not Sci-Fi, but everything in those scenes, when you see that, the little post-it notes, the whiteout containers, the things pinned on the walls, they were all purposefully chosen, selected, and placed, and put in a focus and shot. And the fans in this one, and even though you get chains, the rain, the lights, the spotlights flashing across everyone.
That's right. And it's why the crew called this film Blood Runner, because they were literally donating their blood to make the film, because Ridley was cracking the whip, I think, the whole time. But it comes out brilliant, and that's all we care about is the final thing. So Holden and this guy, Leon, they have this... I mean, so this is the thing. You could take the budget away, and this scene's still good. Because Holden is sort of like casual, I don't care, smoking. Leon is like agitated, annoyed, like, why am I doing this test? Like, and the whole point is setting us up like... why are they doing this test? And really you get to the end of it, and then there's a tent, the music builds up, and he's answering, he's like, like you said, what desert? What's it? I don't know what a tortoise is, tortoise is. Oh, it's like a turtle, but different. It doesn't matter, well, if it doesn't matter, why are you asking me these questions? And they're having a real tense moment, and the music drums up, and then it just relaxes. And he's like, all right. And then he's like, well, tell me about your mother. And Leon's like, oh, that's it. I've had enough. He's cracked it.
Well, he says, let me tell you, the thing about my mother was,
and just
blast this guy.
And so it sets the story in motion, because we're going, why the hell was there this weird interrogation? Why were people so hostile? Leon seemed weird. Holden seemed weird. Like, who's the good guys? Who's the bad guys? That opening scene, right? And then we cut to Deckard on the street, and you said it's a vibrant street. Again, it's a dirty, hustling city. Seems to have a very culturally Asian theme going on, even though we are in the States.
The interesting thing is it's all mixed, so there's Chinese, Japanese, and Korean all going in on at the same time.
Yes, but again, I think it's just trying to imply that it's a future where, the world population has really quadrupled or whatever, like we sort of talking about.
It was a bit soil and greeny.
Yeah, it was.
But more vibrant than soil and green.
But he definitely has this Deckard. We meet this Deckard guy. He's not happy. That's why it's a good bookend at the end. The one I watched, that then he's kind of happy taking a risk, whereas it feels like he's just moping around the place.
Yeah, in the start, you don't really know what he's doing. He said he's quit being a Blade Runner.
Yeah, but then what is he doing?
What is he doing now? He's just kind of haggling for noodles.
Yeah. and I mean, this is one of those things that I know, like Blake Schneider, the screenwriter, talks about. Like, if he just keeps living the life he's on, right, and this story doesn't happen, or he doesn't take the decisions that lead him into this story, is he just sort of destined for death anyway?
Yeah.
Is he living a life worth living? Sorry. And so this is a good script writing or writer's technique as well, is to think, is my character actually making the right decisions to live, the life that you want to explore in your story? And is it just leading to, well, he could just die anyway and it doesn't matter?
Yeah.
Or does it matter? And in this case, well, it does matter, because the next thing you know, he's getting a bit of a tap on the shoulder. You're under arrest. And Gaff, this weird police officer, doesn't speak English. Apparently. With a cane as well. So, like, nice little bits of detail there, isn't there? But what he's doing is he's just dragging him down to the captain, really.
Take him down to the captain. And I did get a lot of soil and green from this film, actually. Like that scene with the captain, where it's like sort of this crummy thing with the fans going, and he's a sweaty, uncomfortable captain. And
crowded office.
The captain's not wearing a uniform, he's just kind of a little
pulls out booze again.
Yeah, he's a bit slimy looking. He's just, it's the same sort of feeling I got from Soil and Green. And he even makes that same comment of, if you're not one of the police, you're just one of the little people. Which again in Soil and Green was like, if you're not a cop, you're unemployed, basically. And you don't get to walk in a place and just take everything.
Yeah. So, I mean, it didn't raise the stakes, I guess, when you do compare it to Soil and Green there, that why was Deckard so disenchanted, but then what was he actually doing?
Well,
if he can just afford noodles all the time, well, then it maybe doesn't matter.
Well, see, at this point in the film, it doesn't make much sense. And so when as I said, I've seen this film twice prior to this, back when I was like maybe, as I said, about 30-ish years ago. And I was, I think, too young to consider it, and wasn't interested in a movie that would require anything other than seeing explosions and that sort of thing. So
big guns.
But when I was watching it this time here, people kept talking about, was Deckard a replicant? And I remember thinking, going, no, he's just a cop, and that's why it was a boring movie. Watching it this time, of course, I was thinking, if I were to, let's entertain the fact that there is this theme of, is Deckard a replicant? You start looking at this opening scene, and he's an ex-cop and all the rest of it, and why is this Gaff guy arresting him and bringing him down? And the way the chief talks to him is a little bit kind of side-eyed. It's like, we're going to get you back on. And you're thinking, maybe he never was a cop beforehand. He just remembers it. And maybe the chief has just been told he was a cop by Tyrell Corp, basically saying, yes, to track these guys down, you want to use this cop, because the argument being that Deckard is a Nexus 6 more like Rachel. Yeah. And he could have just been created 6 months prior for the express purpose of, let's make a Blade Runner who is a replicant hunting down replicants. Yeah. Because then we can just make them want to do that. Yeah. We can program them to do it.
And use the memories of a Blade Runner.
Yeah. And so this scene, I think, plays a lot more, sensibly, if you're taking this from it. Because I remember I was watching it here this time through, and the chief is kind of, you don't get a strong bond between these people. He doesn't feel particularly familiar with Deckard, but he's just saying, you've got a record, and we think you're the best person for it. And now I'm sort of thinking, he's probably just told about Deckard and given a fake reference going, oh yeah, I mean, okay, I don't know anything about this guy, but sure, we'll get him in.
Yeah.
And, he's suspicious of him. He arrests him to bring him in. He talks to him a little bit suspiciously. He's sort of sideways looking at him askance, not so trusting. So yeah, I think that's something you get from watching later into this film, where you start getting these questions raised about whether Deckard is a replicant or not.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's interesting. And this is the catalyst, I'm pretty sure, is where... because his ordinary life, the opening image of him is, haggling for noodles and just kind of slumming it, and you're not really sure. He's just kind of existing.
Yeah.
And then suddenly here's this thing that's going to change
this
you.
exciting venture.
Yeah, there's 6 replicants escaped. 2 of them have been, neutralized through their, various misadventures. But 4 of them, they've killed 23 people or something like that. They're just marching through the world, killing people. It's not surprising. They're military robots designed to kill. What do you think? They're a hammer. Everyone looks like a nail. It's just every situation becomes pretty obvious to solve for them.
So it's a clear catalyst for the main character. Come back and be the Blade Runner you always will be. Come back to the Force. Come on.
Yeah, do it.
Do it. Have a drink.
And isn't this just like The Fifth Element?
Yeah.
Except The Fifth Element is spoofing a bit of Blade Runner.
Yeah.
It's city. Likewise, he's haggling for noodles with the dragon boat guy.
Yeah.
But it's a bright, colourful
That's right.
mess of a city.
Yes.
The real dark bit's down below the fog.
Yeah.
So like below the fog, that's where the Blade Runner.
That's right. That's the Blade Runner world.
And they're upstairs a bit. So
they are.
But go watch Fifth Element again if you haven't.
So you mentioned a lot about that debate. So his debate here is that he doesn't really want to do it, but then he will do it. So that's kind of a very clear debate.
Yeah.
But then the debate is actually, to me, that he goes to the Tyrell. He's agreed to do it. And the first step is to go to the Tyrell Corporation.
Well, he's agreed to at least meet Tyrell.
Yeah. So reluctantly do it. But see, we've seen there's a lot of other cop movies. This is where it's following a cop genre. It could be a murder mystery, there's these or bank robbery, a heist movie, and we need to bring in Dirty Harry back onto the Force to kind of... you're the best at hunting these kind of guys, right? And so it's the same sort of story beats. Bring it back. Let's get you back on. Give you a badge back, and then you can just go for it. We want you back. We sort of need some Dirty Harry tactics, right? We need the best Blade Runner in this case. So bring him back, and he's kind of like, I don't really want to do it, but I'll do it. I'll do it for a glass of whiskey. And so he brings him back. So he goes to the Tyrell Corporation. But this is interesting, isn't it? Because it's like... beyond the beauty of that pyramid. And I mean, first of all, pyramid, right?
I know.
There's a metaphor there.
It looks very Egyptian, Aztec.
Yeah.
It's got the... in fact, it's sort of an Egyptian sort of shape, but it's got all the Aztec detailing like this all throughout this film. So there's...
it's an empire.
Almost like a stone carving thing. And they tower above the rest of the city.
They do, yeah. And as I said, the model was 9 feet tall, which is massive. Models don't need to be that big, but they deliberately made it very big. And we also start to see a lot of the city with those neon signs on the side of buildings.
Enjoy Coca-Cola.
Enjoy Coca-Cola, a bit of cash, cha-ching there. Atari is in it.
Atari, we should be sponsored by Atari.
Akai? You remember Akai?
Akai,
I don't know if they're still around.
Pan Am.
So there's quite a few brands actually throughout this. But the thing with Tyrell is he explains that Nexus 7, what's it all about. But this is what's most important here, and I think this is what draws Deckard more in, is Rachel. So this idea of Tyrell says, do the test on Rachel because she's a human. I want to see you do the test on a human. And so he starts to do it, and it's pretty evident she's not a human.
Did you see the blooper in this scene?
The what?
I don't know about whether they digitally fixed it in other versions, but the theatrical release I was watching, the scene plays out. There's a camera that's kind of off a bit, and there's a bit of a pillar obscuring a bit of the scene. And Deckard has his suitcase, where the Void Kampf machine is in it.
Yep.
Opens the suitcase, and then he just mimes. The machine's already on the desk.
Yeah.
He mimes taking the machine out. There's nothing in his hands.
Oh, there's a goof.
And he
there.
puts it down.
Yeah.
And I actually rewound. I went, what the? And I rewound it, watched it, and went, that's a really good mime, but it's like he's just. I'm wondering, and I'd love it, Ridley, if you want to come on the show and talk to us. I'm wondering, was that like a rehearsal take? Like they just were taking various takes of it, and it was, because the machine was already out, so he must have previously extracted it, or maybe the machine itself the prop was a bit shonky,
it was like,
and wouldn't fit in the case, or they went, don't move it, like it sits there.
Just pretend like you've pulled it out.
And so he just, that really got me. I just, so if you're going to go back and watch it, that scene,
I don't think that was in the version I saw.
the scene where he's taking the out of the suitcase, like they're in the sort of the distance, in the foreground is like some pillar and a chair and stuff, So it's he's only a small character on the screen, but
Interesting.
definitely miming it.
There is, we talked about, they said in the original version, the sergeant, whatever, says there's 6 replicants and one died trying to get to Tyrell.
Yes.
Right? But then in the last version, they say 2 died, because if you do the maths, there's still another one.
Well, I thought one of them was caught in the screening.
No, but that's a dubbed over line of dialogue.
Oh, okay. Actually,
So in the original version, they actually say, he says, like, there's 6 and 1 died getting to Tyrell. So there's 5, but then Deckard only gets 4.
Yeah, so I was. There's actually a couple of scenes here where voices have been dubbed in, like automatic dialogue replacement type thing. And if you look carefully, the lip sync's a bit out, or it's a bit,
something changes. So
it's a bit different.
But anyway, so with Rachel, it's kind of evident she's not. So the break into 2, what do you think then was the break into the second act after he sees Rachel and Tyrell? What kind of takes him on this journey?
I think it was definitely the fact that he was intrigued by Rachel having memories.
Yeah.
And if I get my... if I look at my notes to see the exact timeline, because this is always a problem when you're remembering these films back.
I know.
You try to go the exact... Because one scene is... So, let me see. He meets Rachel. Rachel has memories. Deckard is intrigued by the idea. He's sympathetic to replicants, we can tell.
Yeah.
So I think it's that case where he finds out that she's a replicant but doesn't know it, and that she has memories. And suddenly, and again, this is one of those ones...
But she doesn't want to know, she doesn't want to agree with that, does she?
No.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're thinking, as I said later on, there's more hints on this, but you've got to think, what is Deckard thinking about his own memories? And it does seem... Is he wondering, hang on, if a replicant can now have memories, because probably up to this point he's probably gone, replicants they've got 4 years, that's as many memories as they've got.
Yeah.
But she had memories of, being childhood.
Yeah.
And so he's got to think, and you've got to think yourself, if you're suddenly confronted with this, you go, oh, well, hold on. I've got memories from childhood. She's convinced they're real. They're her memories. But I am convinced that she's actually a robot.
So it's a good complication that then I think on a simple level for his quest or his quest, it's like, these guys aren't... The simple way to read this film is like, well, then he's going, the bad guys are smarter than what you think. They can form memories there, and they might have been implanted, but that means they think like a human.
Yeah.
And so I think on the simplistic version of this film, you could just say, well, then him as the detective is like, I've got to really think, like, this is juicier now.
Yeah, this is
maybe he then quit being a Blade Runner because it's kind of boring for him. He could catch robots and kill them.
Destroy
But
machines.
then now it's like, they're a little bit more sophisticated. This is dangerous. I need to I'm intrigued by that. And so to me, that kind of drives that. It's like a second punch to the story.
I think also he's got to try and... so he's confronted by Rachel and her existence.
Yeah.
And it's like he has to catch these other Blade Runners.
It's a puzzle.
Other Blade Runners. These other Blades?
Yeah.
Other replicants, these skin jobs. And in previous times he would have been the sort of... but he's got to try and catch these replicants. I was going to call them blades again. Replicants.
Replicants.
And interestingly enough, the server technology in in data centers are called blade servers that you get. But anyway, he's got to try and catch these guys to try and prove that no, they are just machines. That what I have been doing is not murder, execution, but rather I have been, destroying malfunctioning machines.
Yeah.
So I would say there's also a bit of that there where he's got to try and
justify.
Yeah, disprove what Rachel has, the conundrum Rachel has put forward. He's got to try and disprove that and go like, Rachel's the only one.
Yeah.
These other ones, they are just malfunctioning.
Yes. And so the B story then in this act 2 is Rachel does turn up. She's kind of going to become the love interest. But beyond the love interest, she's the kind of question, like, because she's not going around killing people. She's going, but hang on, if I'm a robot, then that makes everything in my life fake. But then what's real, what's fake? So it's the deeper question of who they are, isn't it? And whether we should just be destroying them. So we jump into those fun and games in the second act, and we have the Pris comes up, and she pretends to kind of like jump into these. And she looks like a good old 1980s American street hooker, doesn't she?
Yeah. Yeah.
Junkie, whatever. She rocks up. She jumps in these kind of like a homeless person, like under newspapers, whatever. This guy stumbles out of his car, and she kind of deliberately then hops up. And so we can see that she's had some sort of plan. They kind of flirt a little bit. She flirts a bit with him, revealing that she doesn't really have people or money or anything like that, and he invites her into the apartment.
Yeah, and we also see. So, this I'm wondering here if we are getting some variations in the scene ordering, because I got from the Australian Act 2, we see the replicants. So we see Roy and Leon go to the eye doctor.
I know that happened. Sorry, yeah. So I've jumped over that. Yes, yeah, that happened before that scene. Yeah,
yeah. They go to the eye doctor and question him.
Yeah, and he reveals,
and he says, "I just made your eyes.
Yeah,
but your brains were the result of J.F. Sebastian.
Yeah.
And that's where we get Pris.
Yes,
and we discover that this guy that she's sort of sweet talked.
Yeah.
Introduces himself as J.F. Sebastian.
Yeah, so it's a nice little segue, and it suggests that they've planned that, isn't it? Like Leon and Roy confronted the eye maker and then found that information. And this whole way, like we end up in J.F. Sebastian. His apartment is, first of all, like before getting inside that building, the lights, the shadows, all those kind of like, it's like spotlights coming through and just illuminate. There's water on the floor.
That's a real building. The Bradbury
that's
apartment.
The Bradbury apartments.
And I saw some photos of the real interior.
Yeah.
And it is the staircase and so forth.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
I can see why he chose it because it looks like a cyberpunk staircase. Yeah, like you just whack a bit of a brownish filter on it and some golden light on there, and then you.
And those lights coming in from outside, sort of thing. So again, it's no sunlight. We're just getting these like powerful artificial lights.
And here's one of the things we're talking about. The themes are, and we've brought this up any number of times, but water, of course. So they walk up, they get to the top of the landing, and they splash in the puddle. And JF, he says, "Oh, sorry, be careful of the water."
Yeah.
And it's reflecting them. And so again, you go, okay, we're now moving into some sort of like, this is a crossing point.
Yes.
This is like, life, death, spirit world, real world.
Yeah.
And indeed, we go into his apartment.
Yep.
And there's these little machines, like little androids, like comical clown-faced guys marching about the place. And they bump into walls and they're
not perfect.
They're not super intelligent, like they're not even as smart as dogs. They just kind of march about. And yeah, it's sort of it is like a spirit world. There's a bit of a dream world there with mannequins.
Bit of a circus, isn't it?
Yeah, circus is sort of thing. And so that's kind of that. I think that water is the segue into this other world we're going to enter.
And it felt to me like you as the audience know there's danger for him because they're trying to get to Tyrell. But then in his crazy circus world and even the way he was, suddenly it felt I don't know, they felt like they were on the same page a bit more.
Yeah, they did feel that way.
Yeah.
Particularly when he has Methuselah syndrome, whatever it is, which means he ages rapidly.
Yes.
There's kind of, there's kinship here.
Yeah.
The difference is, though, he's got very strong memories and he's, fully formed, as it were. I like, on that puddle of water, though, looking at that as, again, another one of these examples that puddle was included. They didn't have to include the water. They could have shot a bit higher and not shown it and just heard the little splash and not made much of a point. But a point was made of it. You could see it there. It was done for a reason. And I love it when you get these scenes and you can look at them, and as they play out, it all feels right.
Yeah.
And that's what that scene does for me there.
So Deckard goes to the apartment, the hotel room that Leon had been at.
Yeah.
And so, good old cop following the pathway. And
flicks the light till it turns on.
Yeah, and looks around and is pretty dingy, and Gaff's there with him, and they're sort of, looking around. He discovers those photos, like this bunch of photos, but doesn't discover much else. And we actually then see Leon and...
he finds the scale.
Oh, that's right. And that's the other thing. He finds like a scale thing he puts into a little baggie, and that's about it, really. And we see outside that Leon's watching, and with Roy's like, did you get your photos?
Yeah.
Your precious photos. Yeah. And he's like... Yeah, I like my photos. And back at Deckard's apartment, he's kind of, zoning in, and I can't quite exactly remember what he's doing, but then he goes to that piano and he starts playing the piano.
Well, he's sitting there with his head on the piano, and there's all heaps of photos.
Yeah, and that's the odd thing. When you say that, is he a replicant? Those photos, especially later with Rachel, when you can kind of see them a little bit further back, they're quite antique kind of styled photos, which is odd, isn't it? Like it'd be like you or me having photos of like a great-great-grandparent.
Yeah, and they were Deckard's photos.
Yeah.
Which is why you're thinking... and this is that subtext that he's got a pile of the photos from the replicant, and then he's got these other photos and the music sheet up.
Yeah.
And and you've got to think to yourself, why does he have a piano?
Yeah, for a detective.
With sheet music. Where did he learn to read sheet music? That's really weird.
It seems out of character for him.
And he's got these old photos, and he's seen the photo of Rachel supposedly with her mum. And here you're getting that sense, which I never, again, as a little teenager, I didn't pick this stuff up, but I'm looking at it now going, now I'm seeing what people are saying about is Deckard a replicant? Because here he's got his photos, and there's a similarity being drawn here. It's like, how come I've got these photos? And he's on a piano. Why does he have a piano, for crying out loud?
And he daydreams of a white unicorn.
Yeah, so this is the new scene in the director's cut.
Yeah.
He has his little unicorn dream.
Which, side note, Ridley likes to have white horses and have shots. So if you're really keen on this, go online, have a little bit of look. Probably pretty easy. I found a montage in a lot of Ridley's films since Blade Runner. He's had the white horse shot.
I think I've seen one in Gladiator.
It's quite a similar. He's got it in Gladiator, and I haven't seen it, but I think is it the recent sort of Matt Damon's in it or something, Ben Affleck, that Ridley did. There's another white horse, and they're almost very similar shots to this one in Blade Runner, where the horse kind of, it's in a forest or it's in a field, and it does a bit of a hook gallop. Yeah. So what I mean is it goes like left to right in the shot, which is very visual, like what you would do with a camera and staging a horse. But it's interesting that he's got that in a lot of his films. God knows what it means to him, but it obviously has some sort of connection for him. But in this film, it's kind of like a daydream, isn't it? Like the white unicorn.
And I like the symbolism of unicorns.
Chasing the white unicorn,
because,
like chasing the fantasy.
I mean, a unicorn is, and we still use the term today for the same reasons, like when we're talking about the tech startup that goes from nothing to $1 billion super quick, like in a year or two.
It's the white unicorn.
They're unicorn startups.
Yeah.
Because they've just suddenly cracked this $1 billion mark. Yeah. That's not a normal thing. It's as rare as a unicorn.
Yeah.
And I think this film, there's also a unicorn statue or toy in J.F. Sebastian's hall, which again is this play on, Deckard has this unicorn dream. Does that have something to do with J.F. Sebastian? And his obviously enjoys a unicorn. But I also like It's just the unicorn is Rachel is
Yeah.
the unicorn.
Yeah, Rachel's a unicorn.
Because she's a Nexus 6 that believes she's a human and is almost, and it took like hundreds of, questions to catch her out enough to realise that she wasn't human.
Yeah, and then now she's realising she's not a human. What does she do? Which is interesting. Like she's thinking through this problem, right? Like, but she's also then not just going around killing people. So she is the unicorn.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and then anyway, he has a bath and he's looking at the pictures and he's looking at the scale.
This is the famous enhance,
which is still not possible to do this to this quality.
Interesting though, they're getting there's some very good computer programs now which will manufacture detail out of very little, but they're making the detail. It's not there.
That's not there because
they're using artificial intelligence to figure out what it would probably be like, or what would seem reasonable to be there.
And that is okay. I can accept that. As someone that knows cameras and film, this has always been something that I go with it. I go with it, but it's always like it's impossible to do that. I still remember like seeing this as a teenager when I understood cameras as like. I think it was actually an episode of the X-Files and they zoomed in and then they clear the focus. And I'm like, you can't do that.
No.
You can't do that. If you take the photo and it's out of focus, you can't clear it. You can clean it. You can't clear it. And then I remember the Under Siege 2 with Steven Seagal. And at the start of that, there's like, it's absolutely ridiculous to talk about teenage boys. But at the start of that, there's a satellite image and they zoom in. And then they like, focus an image on the beach and it's a woman with her top off and talk about targeting teenage boys, start the film with, boobs. And I'm like, you can't do that. You cannot do that on a photo.
No, if that detail was not originally captured, you can't find it there. No.
Anyway, but in this film, he's zooming in and, he's zooming in. But I did like that cool, like, I thought it was a really nice sci-fi touch, hey, that like grid 44 to 72 or whatever. It's like, like, and it was so 80s.
It was also very conversational.
Yeah. Like,
he doesn't use the same commands.
No.
He says, move right, move, stop and back and open.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, and you go, what does all that mean? Like,
but it makes sense, right? Like, because that would be a simple, like, speaking to Siri now on Apple. But it's like, if you think you can create a Nexus 6.
Yes.
That walks around and does thinking and emotions and has memories. I mean,
Google
surely
Home
you
Assistant
could. Yeah, it will be pretty sophisticated. Yeah. So surely you could say, bring up a photo of me when I was 5 and zoom in on the person in the back and actually go across ways. And that's like,
Yeah, so it gets this picture of the woman with some sort of tattoo you can't quite make out, but there's a dark patch on the side of her face.
And print it, and it's a Polaroid.
Yes, right.
Which is very millennial. I've got one of those little printers. I got one of them recently.
My wife's got a little Polaroid camera thing.
Yeah, they're awesome. So then he takes the scale. He's got that image of the woman, takes the scale thing, and he asks at a local fish market,
down the
science
China
lab, whatever. Is it fish? And she looks, no, a snake, and it's artificial. It's got a code on it, like a creator's code. And so then he like walks through the markets again, this busy, hostile, it is very vibrant, but again, it's very, there's tubes and there's pipes and there's smokes and there's bright lights and there's fans again. And, there's people everywhere and, like it's a crowded space to be in. Reminded me a lot of like Bangkok, going to somewhere like that, like a city like that, and the roads all disrupted and, but there's like millions of people around you, and traffic. There was a great shot there where he's kind of basically walking faster than the cars.
Yeah, it says,
like which is a big city thing. Right?
I think the thing says, don't walk. It's saying, don't walk. And people are walking across because the cars aren't moving.
Yeah. And anyway, so the snake, you see him, you don't even follow him in, but he's got this snake dealer, doesn't he? Like,
the guy in the bar with his...
Yeah. And then he goes across, who's led him to this more nightclub place, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so go in there and he tries to harass a businessman or something.
Yeah, he bought the snake.
He bought the snake and he's kind of not giving him much. So then he starts drinking heavily himself and calls Rachel out for a night out. Come on, just come out to the bar. And Rachel goes, no, I don't want to come to a bar. And poor old Deckard's rejected, so goes back to drinking more heavily, right?
Not in my version. The version I watched. No.
Yeah, anyway, so that's the scene that happens for me. And then the woman comes out on stage and she does her dance with the snake, kind of briefly. And you don't see much of that. And then, in fact, I don't even think you saw much of it at all. It was more sort of off camera. And then 40's hanging out in the corridor with the paper. And she walks past and he puts on this show about being like a union rep. For performers. Have you been anything
weird little nerdy voice?
Yeah, he puts on a stupid nerdy voice and looks around the place. And she's a bit suspicious, but seems a bit harmless. And I want to just say something here as well, because then there's a mention of the snake being real, and she's like, "Oh, it's a robotic snake. If I could afford a real snake, do you think I'd be like working here?" But what I wanted to just stop for a second is another motive in this film is wild animals, because, like we said, the unicorns are, I don't know, are they made up or are they real? I don't know. But
my unicorn's real.
Your unicorn's real. There's that great movie, My Unicorn. But the thing is, earlier in the film, you've got in the captain's office, he's kind of got like the wild savannah, right? So in that crowd, there's a picture of the wild savannah. Deckard has a picture of a rhino in the background.
Oh, does he?
When he went to the snakes, there's a moment where he sort of stops on the street and two ostriches come by.
Yeah, I heard the ostriches through.
There's the owl, the robotic owl. That's kind of quite exotic. So it's kind of like game animals are in this film as a bit of a motive as well, which I guess if you could really, I'm bringing on my film art school here, you could really break it down like robots versus things that live or something, right?
Yeah.
And even though most of
the juxtaposition of the ostriches being herded through a super busy street full of markets and things.
Yeah, yeah. So is it definitely, and there's mentioned a lot of fish. There's a lot of fish, and stuff. So like animals, living creatures, I suppose. So
I think this is where we're coming to the midpoint.
Yeah, we're
things
getting
turn.
very close.
So we've had all of the fun and games. He's done his detective work. We've seen him, follow some clues. He sort of we've seen a bit of the bad guys doing a few things to let us know what they're up to.
Well, yeah. So he finds her, he confronts her. So just when he's putting on his nerdy little voice, she actually then beats him up and reveals that she's a replicant, because she just beats him up badly, right? Like really quickly. He hunts her down that crowded street, shoots her. It's a big epic shooting scene. She runs through 10 glass windows in the version of smash, and he keeps firing as well, like till she.
There's back with the good old bloody squibs going off, and she had this wonderful transparent coat, so the blood just sprayed.
So to me, Surrey, like that's all still fun and games, and then she's dead, and the police are all there, and he's like, "I'm a Blade Runner." They're like, right. And then that Gaff, is it Gaff or is it the captain? One of them rocks up and is there.
Yeah, Gaff just leads him over to the captain.
That's right. It's the captain then. And this is the midpoint to me, because he says to him, Rachel has escaped.
Oh, yeah.
And now you still have 4 replicants.
Yeah, you've still got 4 replicants.
Yeah, and he's like, what? I just killed one. And it's like, no, Rachel's escaped. You have to kill her, which to me, see, that's a midpoint, because we know he's got feelings for Rachel, or he's like sympathetic or empathetic to her.
And it's amplified as well, because the chief drives off.
Yep.
And Deckard looks up, and there's Rachel in the background, and she turns and walks off. Yeah. So that's kind of like a second kick to the guts, because she just heard that he's supposed to hunt her down now.
Yeah. So, and he sort of does, right? So to me, that's the man. He wanders after her, and with that, he's confronted by Leon, and Leon starts to beat the living shit out of him, and it knocks his gun away, and he's got him, and he sort of throws him around. And he's saying, I'm going to kill you. And it's the best way to get rid of a Blade Runner. He should have said, I want my photos back.
Yes, I know.
But, he's starting to beat him. He's overpowered him. And with that, his head explodes. And Rachel has fired the gun.
Yes, blasted it.
So it's a nice surprise, that. So it's definitely bad guys closing in, because then it's like, oh, well, does he kill Rachel?
So now he's only got 3 to kill.
Now he's only got 3 to kill. She's killed 1. Great. Back at their apartment, they're both licking their wounds, and it's a really kind of intimate scene, that, because he's like, yeah, I'm shaking. You got the shakes? And they kind of drink heavily. he passes out. She plays on the piano.
Yeah,
which wakes him back up, and she explains, like, is it my memory? I don't remember learning to play piano, or is it just these implant memories?
Yes,
Yeah.
and that I think also is where she asks, "Have you ever taken the Voight Camp test?"
Yes, she does.
Yeah, so he
doesn't answer.
He doesn't answer. He lies back and pretends to sleep.
Yeah,
and she plays with the piano, and he comes up. And she says, like the implants up, which again makes you think, okay, he's avoided that Voight Camp test. So I'd say, no, he probably hasn't.
Mm.
Or maybe he has, but it was inconclusive. And then you're wondering, well, why does he have a piano?
Yeah.
Is this something like another symbol telling us that, you know what, the special Nexus 6s, we
all have piano memories.
Well, her memories come from Tyrell's niece, who could play piano, apparently.
Yeah.
So you're wondering, did Deckard get memories which included he's just like, Tyrell's just going, oh, this one from my niece. These ones work from my niece because, you know, they're non-gendered. And then these ones here from some other Blade Runner. You know, so the story goes on. So you got to wonder then, oh, how come he has a piano? Like, because it is, why would this Blade Runner know how to play piano?
It doesn't make sense he has a play. No, it doesn't. And
not just play piano, but like with complicated sheet music.
Yeah.
You know, he's not just sort of playing. It's not just a decorative piece. There's actual sheet music. And, you know, it takes. It's literacy. You've got to learn how to read sheet music. It's not that easy.
And doesn't he say something along here like? I can't remember the exact line, but he says something like, "I'm like the music." The music came to me in a dream or something, doesn't he? Doesn't he say something like that? Like, because she asked him the question like, you play piano, but he doesn't actually answer. He goes, oh, like, the music came to me in a dream. He says some line. The version I saw is something like that. I probably should have written it down, but it was very, like, he wasn't answering her question directly, and it was trying to set us up as an audience of a bit like, what, like, yeah.
And this is one of the, what do you call it, problematic scenes, which is a very typical of an 80s film or a noir detective film, which is I mean, by today's standards and understanding, he sexually assaults Rachel.
He does. Yeah.
Because
this is the Me Too movement all over.
Yeah, well, because this is like, you know, he slams the door shut and pushes her back and intimidating her, really.
Yeah, well, because he tries to kiss her. She's not interested.
Yeah, she goes,
no
no.
consent, right?
And then he kind of gives her this weird look and like, it's almost like an intimidation.
Yeah, and then she leaves and he like slams the door and actually slams her back.
Yeah.
Like he pushes her back against that grill and literally says to her, you tell me you want this.
Yeah.
You know, and she goes, oh, I want it.
I kind of didn't like it, but I was going, it's following, in the 80s, this was not an uncommon, the idea it's supposed to be showing, as opposed to what it kind of is showing. It's supposed to be showing that there's two characters who don't express themselves well.
Yeah.
But they both know they want each other.
Yeah.
And so it sort of takes this, it's often also you get the ones where the two characters have an argument, and then one goes to slap the other, but they catch the hand and they look at each other.
Yeah.
And then they start kissing, as if that would ever happen in real life.
Yeah, that's right.
But I think the idea is supposed to be that sort of thing. There's a tension there, and it takes a real effort for someone to break through that barrier that they both have.
Yep.
In order to go, but I've seen it done better in more modern films where there is kind of that tension and there's that sort of, but it's two-way kind of, not aggressive sexually, but as in there's a two-way sort of. They're looking a bit fighty, and then they break down and go, you know what? It's not anger I'm feeling. It's actually, I just don't know how to express myself. And
well, see, I suppose in the modern context, what could have happened is, he could have tried to kiss her and she rejected him, and then she walked to the door, and instead of him like slamming the door, like leant on the door, and then she pulls it and he lets go because I'll let you go.
Yeah, I'm not actually stopping you.
Yeah, I'm not actually stopping you. And because I think I have seen this, I don't know which film, but there's like, she could open the door and then like she slams it.
Yeah, and turns around.
And then turns around and then like goes, well, why do you have to be confronting me? Why can't we, and they kind of talk, like you just said, as characters that can't talk. One of them leads that conversation and then that leads to kissing and, blah, blah.
Yeah, so...
It might be a bit more natural, whereas what came across here is it's a little bit rapey.
Yeah, it is a little bit on its
side. But you have to have a look at the context. You go back into older Hollywood films and, Clint Eastwood grabbed, or, in some of those classic, especially 1950s, like the man would grab the woman and yank them towards them, and kind of literally hold their head to their mouth.
Yeah.
So it is context.
You also got to wonder, though, she's a robot. Where do her rights start? I mean, that's another thing here is that because it seems that in this world you can shoot replicants.
Yeah, he's allowed to just kill them.
So, I don't know. It's not, as I said, it's a bit problematic, and you do have to look. It's not as bad as. There's some films where it's really worse, cringy, sort of like, oh my God.
It's not totally cringy.
But you do have to realise that this was a common movie trope, despite it not being palatable these days.
And we don't, again, as a glorification of that, we don't see awkward, it's implied that then they make love or whatever, and it's all a bit awkward, as we've just said, but they don't actually show that. They don't exploit that, which other films in the 80s definitely did. So this leads to me like an All Is Lost. And then just before that, Pris and Roy, they're taunting, discussing and pleading with Sebastian about taking them to Tyrell. And there's a great kind of, not cat and mouse taunting, but just, him saying, I can't really take you there because he knows what's probably going to happen. And like, why don't we just all stay friends? But then they're going, yeah, but you don't quite have the genius that we need. And so there's that kind of, payoff. And then they do twist his arm enough, sort of they exploit that illness that he has and play off that, like, well, you don't have long to live, we don't have long to live. And that's all we really want, is to kind of live a bit longer.
Yeah.
And so he does take them up to the great pyramids of Los Angeles or whatever.
Yeah. And it's a wonderful scene. I mean,
this scene with Tyrell.
Is this the death? Do you think?
I think this is. Yeah, this is the All Is Lost.
And this is one of those interesting things, and we see this in a number of movies. There are some movies that are really plot beats are very straightforward. Yeah. One protagonist has each of these important points. And we've seen some where they have chronologically mixed up, the actual plot point or beat occurred in the past, but we're seeing a flashback of it and it affects the current.
So it still connects.
This one here, and which was the other one was where it was someone else. So this is where Roy, the death of the idea that replicants can live beyond 4 years occurs here. So there is hope up to this point that maybe there will be some resolution between Deckard and these replicants and Rachel as well, because there's this concern about Rachel. She's a replicant. So how old is she?
So, that's the thing. We as an audience are taken on a journey here where at first the replicants seem like murdering robots, which they kind of are, but then as we learn more and more about their actual truth and also the Deckard scenario, when he gets to this point, even with Sebastian, they've been taunting and discussing and playful. Like even this scene with Tyrell, we're almost on their side a little bit. Tyrell is the bad guy, actually. Like in the grand scheme of things, because and that's why this scene's so cool. So and again makes this film pretty. A similar film with such substance for the villain is Die Hard. Like with Hans, and it's the same here. We have a bit of empathy for Roy. And the more it goes on, the more empathy we actually have for Roy, even though he's the antagonist.
Yeah, and this here is his plot point.
Yeah.
The death, the idea of longevity, and the fact that you have to accept some parts of what you're given.
Yeah.
And try to live the best you can.
That's right.
Which is it's a message for all of us, really,
It
is that
It is.
there are some things you just can't change.
Yeah.
But you can, it's you can't, you can't control the wind, but you can set your sails.
Yeah.
Is what
And
Tyrell says. And Roy's not pleased with that.
no,
As none of us are.
There's a couple of things there. Like, I mean, again, I don't know all the science, but didn't you find like Tyrell's explanation? It was almost very much like he was almost talking about a human body. Because he was like, oh, if we increase the protein will turn into, this, and then that accelerates the virus. You'll have a virus that will just kill you anyway. Yeah. And it was all very biological, which I'm sure the Nexus 7, 6s, whatever they are. Yeah. 6s, they're so sophisticated. Sure, they are biological, but it was like, we've implanted this doomsday device in you, and anything around it will just destroy you anyway.
Yeah.
But the descriptions of it wasn't mechanical. It was almost like they were talking about a human body.
Yes.
It was like a sickness if we try to... So it's the same as us, right? It's a metaphor for us. Like, oh, I want to live till I'm 200. Yeah, but if we give you that protein, if we mix with your DNA, it's going to end up with you with like cancerous growth.
It always just turns into cancer.
Yeah, like you're going to be... it's going to then destroy your brain and cancer, and you're like, oh, okay. Well, yeah, but you could come up with something that like slows the beat of my heart. Oh, but yeah, we're just going to end up with cancer. Yeah. So, and then a virus like COVID could just knock you out because you're too old and not, So yeah, that was to me that all is lost, and it was a great scene. So that kind of jumps us after that the stakes are raised now for Deckard, because Roy and et cetera, it's like, and Pris now are, like, they can't save themselves. So are they just going to go on a manic, like, killing spree? They have to be stopped kind of thing. And so Deckard learns that JF Sebastian was also murdered, and I was like, oh.
Well, because he calls JF Sebastian and Pris answers.
Yeah. Can I just say before that, Bart, that death of Tyrell, like in the version I saw, squeezing the eyeballs into the brain, awesome death. Awesome death.
Yeah, it was a little bit off camera on the theatrical release.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
He puts his thumbs poised to go in.
In the version I saw, you see a lot, and you don't need to see much, because then it's like, it's cutting to his hands back, looking from almost Tyrell's point of view almost, and you're just hearing the crunching and the like a literal robot like he was would just squish our human brain, and it's great.
He's gone straight in for it. Yeah. So Deckard, he gets the wind of JF Sebastian as being a contact, and he calls, and it goes to Pris. A woman answers, and Deckard's going, okay, well, they've obviously already got to him.
Yeah.
So heads on down to the Bradbury apartments, and it's beautifully shot again with light and
the fans,
spotlights flashing and swirling through, and up there he splashes through the water, and it's pouring rain outside.
Yeah.
And he goes in, and we get a quiet moment as he wanders through, and here he can't tell the difference between Pris and the other mannequin androidy things.
Yeah.
Until he sort of looks a bit too closely, and then she fights him, and he ends up shooting her.
Yeah. There's a great groin kind of cracking of his neck by Pris, which is great. She's on top of his neck and kind of cracking him, which is great.
Giving him, trying to twist his head around.
Yeah.
But you got to remember, poor Pris, she wasn't a military robot. She was a military/leisure robot.
Yeah.
So lucky for Deckard, really, because the other one, I don't know if we got her name, the snake woman, she was an assassin killer.
Yeah.
So he got off lightly with her.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Roy returns, and we get this cat and mouse
scenario
situation where Roy is sort of he's going, okay, he's won. And ironically, you got to think, if Deckard hadn't killed Pris, Roy was only going to live for another hour?
Yeah.
At best.
Yeah.
And Pris not much more than that. And it seemed Roy only went after Deckard because he killed Pris.
Yeah, because he went up and he kisses Pris, and
and it's very touching, and this flashing between sort of a cold machine logic and child, like you'd imagine, it's almost like a child doesn't quite understand death, and maybe a a teenager getting their first kiss, and you know, like Rutger does a great job of this. Like it comes across as crazy, but you realize it's not crazy. It's just it's confused, it's upset, it doesn't know what to do with its emotions. He rips his clothes off and runs around in his pantaloons.
Yeah. And there's a great, like you're saying there's a great conflict he's having because Deckard runs, which is and tries to escape, this cat and mouse scenario. And whereas Roy is kind of like, he's in control, but he's not, he's the one having the kind of existential kind of crisis point.
He's got the time clock on him.
Yeah, but he's kind of going, I want to kill you because you killed Pris, but this world doesn't make much sense.
Yeah.
Should I kill you? I could just kill you.
Yeah.
But I'm going to also die. You're fearful of me. Should you be? Yes, you should be fearful of me.
Yeah.
There is no answer. I can't extend my life. Should I squash your life? It's a very metaphorically him really discussing that whilst he's like taunting Deckard. And it's such a great lot of shots here, isn't it? Because the building is like breaking apart. He clambers up that sort of staircase.
He's fighting for his life as best he can.
Yeah, and he's really not a hero in the traditional sense here. Like he is a frightened little mouse, whereas Roy is the cat. And he's like scurrying away. And he that great scene where he. Roy punches a hole through the wall and brings his arm through and breaks both his fingers. There's a lot of howling and screaming and water running down the walls. I thought there was a lot of connotations here that then we've seen in The Matrix. And so this is obviously The Matrix. I mean, The Matrix has borrowed this aesthetic.
Yeah.
And Dark City would be another one of the darkness, of the rain, of the wet inside the buildings.
Yes.
So like inside this Bradbury, during this chase, it's raining like anything outside, but we have these wet walls, like literally rain dripping down the walls.
Rotten floors soaking,
and walls that punch through. And we see that, in The Matrix, it's Agent Smith that does that. It's the same kind of concept. So I saw some connotations there.
Oh, even the finale where Deckard jumps and doesn't make it.
Yeah.
And then the robot just goes boing, jumps across pretty easily.
Yeah.
And sits there and watches him, and he says that line that you started this episode with, which is, this is what it's like to live in fear.
Yeah.
It's what it's like to live as a slave.
Yeah.
Except I think Roy thinks of it again and goes, well, hang on, he's been struggling and fighting for life, just like, is it really living in fear as a slave, or is it, or is living in fear living?
Yeah.
Is that what this is?
Yeah.
And he has that turnaround. This is the reversal that happens because the original plan was Deckard's going to come in and execute them. Also, Roy's original plan was he's going to come and execute Deckard.
Yeah.
But then we've had this reversal where things are not so simple.
Yeah.
And he saves Deckard and pulls him up. And you can see Roy's had this real revelation of like, this is what life is. Life isn't having it easy.
Yeah.
Life is your experiences, and your experiences are both good. Like he would have had good times with Pris and bad, which is what's going on here. And without that, with death, you lose all of that. And he has his little monologue where he points that out. He's seen all these incredible things, things that you wouldn't believe, as he says.
Yeah.
But then, he's going to die, and that's all going to be gone.
All those memories are gone.
And that's kind of why he doesn't kill Deckard, because he doesn't want... First of all, he's just told Deckard this, and he also doesn't want what's just happened to be lost.
Yes.
Because if he kills Deckard and then he just dies, then what was all the meaning of Pris's death? What was the meaning of his struggle to find Tyrell and all the rest of it?
So he dies, doesn't he? In that moment, he's frozen, and Deckard takes him in, and he really does take him in. There's a moment in the version I saw he's taking him in, and then Gaff startles him.
Yes.
And he says, what line does he say? Something like...
I suppose you're wondering about Rachel.
Yeah, she won't... But he says the line was something like, too bad she won't live, but then who does?
Yeah, who really does?
Yeah.
Which, again, is kind of that restating of this theme a bit, this that we have about life and memories and experience. And okay, so here again we have a bit of a divergence. So the original theatrical release, Deckard goes, he's talked about Rachel, he knows.
Yeah.
And he goes home and he goes in and Rachel's covered with the sheets.
Yep.
And he's afraid the worst has happened, but he gets that close, realizes just sleeping, kisses her, they wake up.
Yep.
They exit the apartment because obviously he's gone like, we can't hang here.
Yep.
And he stops and looks back and sees there's a little origami unicorn. Now, because the original theatrical didn't have the unicorn dream, there was no relationship there.
Yeah.
Except there was the unicorn motif in J.F. Sebastian's. And as I said, there is a traditional idea of a unicorn being that unusual, exceptional thing.
Yeah.
And this is Deckard getting to have a relationship, with Rachel, because you can take it from one point of view that Gaff saying, you're a sad bum of a dude who's not had a good life. This is your unicorn. Your relationship with Rachel is something that is special.
Yeah.
And it's one off. I'm letting you have it.
Yeah.
The introduction of the unicorn dream is supposed to let us say that Gaff was in fact Deckard's handler. And just like Deckard knew of all of Rachel's memories, Gaff knew of it. And it makes sense if you even think of it, the way Gaff arrests him and is there with him when they're going to Leon's apartment. So it is very much like Gaff isn't helping the investigation.
No.
Gaff is just minding Deckard.
Yeah, he just keeps rocking up, doesn't he?
So it's almost as if Gaff is the handler who's just keeping an eye by Tyrrell Corp on this experiment.
Yeah.
And I do kind of like that. I do prefer and this is controversy here, I do prefer the theatrical release from the point of view that it's not so there isn't that unicorn dream, which I didn't think it was entirely in keeping with the feel of the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
A unicorn dream like that is kind of a weirdly optimistic little dream to have in such a dreary place.
Yeah.
And then they walk out the elevator. Door closes. The final cut ends there.
Yep.
Theatrical version then has the happy ending.
Right.
Which is where they're driving through natural wilderness, green areas, which is sort of odd. And there's a bit of a voiceover that says, we don't know, they said that, replicants have 4 years. We don't think that's with Rachel. We don't think that's the case with Rachel because, she's kind of Tyrrell's special experiment. How long we're going to have, we don't know.
Yeah.
But it's going to be good type of thing. And yeah, that's sort of nice. And it's a very contrasting ending scene to the opening where they're coming into that dismal place.
Yeah.
I can see the arguments against that ending because where did all this green countryside come from and why aren't people living there?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so if we just go, they just exit the elevator and their doors close, that's still, it's a reasonably optimistic ending. It's like they get to have their moment.
Yeah, and that was the version I saw, and to me it was with that voiceover, because they repeat that voiceover of Gaff saying, too bad she won't live, but who does? It's kind of almost, to me, the interpretation is like, just live your life. And because early in the film she said, will I be hunted if I got out of the city? And he goes, well, not by me, this is Deckard.
Yeah.
And he goes, but someone else will. And so I interpreted at the end, like someone like Gaff or another cop would just try to hunt you. Another Blade Runner would come hunting for you.
Yeah.
But the value in that is it's almost like Gaff saying, I'm going to give you a head start. Go for it. Run away.
Yeah.
Live the life with her. But someone's probably going to come for you. And that might be tomorrow, or it might be in 5 years. So you get the 5 years with her.
Yeah.
And the whole point of Rutgerhauer's big speech is kind of like, you've got to have those memories, otherwise you just die anyway.
Yeah.
So that was sort of my interpretation. So whether you need a drive through the wilderness or not to double prove that, it just felt to me like he looks at that origami, there's that voiceover line, and Deckard kind of goes, and he runs to the elevator, whatever. So he's choosing, and it's a very different Deckard to the start, who's kind of moping on the city street, ordering noodles, not really living a life.
He's gained some sort of energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there you go. So if you want to chew me out for my controversial statements I've made, then
Go for
please go for it. I mean, why not? This movie has been the centre of many debates.
It has.
As people have pulled apart various nuances and so forth from the technical screen, visuals and so forth, through to as the story elements and philosophy. So let us know, where.
Yeah, you can find us. Meanwhile, Ridley Scott's like, I just wanted a movie about a cop chasing robots.
A future cop movie.
Yeah. I mean, dudes, the unicorn doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
You're over-reading this, man. You're over-interpreting
I
it.
passed by an op shop and there's this cool dusty unicorn thing, so I bought it and put it in the scenes with
And I've
J.F.
just decided to put unicorns in all my movies because I think it's cool, man.
Yeah, so we have Blade Runner and we have...
Ridley, if you're out there, please correct us.
Get in touch.
Get in touch.
I know you'll want to.
Yeah.
We have our classic ladder, which is a separate little pile of goodies
Yes.
to go
Very
through.
good.
And
I think we've got 14.
well,
I don't know if that doesn't make sense, really.
There's
Anyway, we need to, as we said, I think we're going to get to episode 100 and we're going to tidy this up. Yeah, anyway, it doesn't really matter about how many rungs on the ladder.
18.
It's just where my suggestion, nice and quickly, I think tonight for this bit, sorry, is if you watched Total Recall, Blade Runner, and Demolition Man. If you watch that trilogy, I think that would be one hell of a science
Should you watch
fiction.
Blade Runner first? Because
Correct.
Total Recall borrows quite a few visual elements.
Yeah, I get it, but I just think that 3 in the mix would be a cool little mix.
It is. It's a pretty good mix.
But let me know what your trilogy would be out there in Spacebrain Land. What about you, Surrey? Where are you going to put it?
I like it with Alien.
Yeah.
And The
keeping
Matrix.
Okay. Ooh, okay.
Because so Alien, the visuals of Alien are actually very similar to Blade Runner.
Aren't they? Yeah, that
and you can see
detail.
they're both Ridley Scott, and you can see where, I mean, it was only, 4 years after Alien or something
Yeah.
that he made this one. And so you got to think that probably took him a year or two to do it, and so it was actually really close behind Alien. And the use of the lighting and the coloration and even some of the visual effects and styling.
Yeah, you can see the Ridley Scott.
Is very Alien.
Yeah.
And so it would be great. Alien and Blade Runner, and I'm going to, let's go with the, what did I say? Matrix. Oh my goodness. Lucky I can talk tonight.
You are. You're lucky. Okay, well, that would be nice. Quick, what about the science? What type of science can you pull out? Is it going to be robotics? Is it memories? Is it...
We've talked about a lot of these things, but I'm going to talk a little bit about this idea of what is it that gives us identity? And now I'm going to preface this with this being heavily based in the science of psychology. Mm-hmm. It's almost impossible to get a definitive answer on this. All we can do is get strong hints of direction.
Yeah.
And I was reading through one of my favourite little science magazines called Scientific American.
Right.
And they had an article there written by Dr. Bobby Azarian.
I thought you were going to say Bobby Newport.
He's Dr. Bobby.
Parks and Rec.
He's got his PhD in neuroscience from George Mason University.
Of course.
Where he conducts research in the Visual Attention and Cognition Lab.
Nice.
So that's pretty exciting. So he wrote a wonderful article summing up some of the research around identity and, whether it occurs in our memory or not.
Ooh, okay.
Are we, in fact, our memory? And so what we've got to talk about here is our sense of identity can be a personal sense of identity we have, or the way other people see us.
Yeah, okay.
And so it's very hard to determine how we see ourselves because we change subtly all through the time.
And look, I personally think you never will understand how other people see you.
No. So what we can look at though is how, for example, someone that I know very well, whether they are the same or different from yesterday.
Yeah.
So what we look through a bit of the history though, first of all, which is in the 17th century, we had John Locke, which was the name from Lost. If you remember that, he was named after John.
I remember John Locke.
So the real John Locke though was a British empiricist, and he had this thing called the memory theory, where he says that a person's identity only reaches as far as their memory extends into the past. So in other words,
you can't make new memories.
Yeah, who one is, it critically depends on what one remembers.
Yeah.
Thus, as a person's memory begins to disappear, so does identity.
Yep.
So, and this is really interesting because then you go, well, we have people who have deteriorating memory.
Yeah.
We've got Alzheimer's disease.
That's right, yeah.
So a 2004 study followed Alzheimer's patients and found that those exhibiting impairments in autobiographical memory, so that's memory about themselves, found that those exhibiting impairments, they, on a standard set of psychological tests, they showed they had changes in the strength and quality of their identity. So the strength of identity was determined by, they asked them a whole bunch of questions about, please describe answer this question in as many ways as you can. Yep. Who am I? Yeah. Obviously yourself, who are you? Yes. Ask that of yourself, right? Yeah. And so they would go, well, how many unique statements? So that's like the strength of their identity. And then how abstract or specific were the statements? Right. And that's the quality. And they certainly found that, of course, as people progressed through Alzheimer's, they had fewer ways of describing who they were. Right. And they were more and more abstract. They were less, they were like, I'm a person. Yeah. I was born. You kind of go, okay, you don't. But this, of course, is not too convincing from the point of view of, well, is this just someone who can't remember how to say things about their memory? Yeah. Are they still identifiably them? And so we've got to ask other people, say, does this person here who's losing their memory, do they seem like themselves? Would you say they, at some point, and this gets reported, at some point in mental degeneration, a person or through accident trauma, they're not the same person. Yep. So there's another little experiment was done. Experiment seems a little bit odd. It's actually a series of observations as opposed to necessarily an experiment. But so they did this cognitive social cognition research. Right. So they found out that for the impression of identity is largely dependent on the moral dimension. Ooh. So in other words, how we see people, whether they're positive, negative, or to be approached or avoided, is mostly determined by our assessment of their moral character and not their intellect, knowledge, or other personality traits. Yeah, okay. And if you think about that, if you see some guy wearing sort of, what you might consider tough, bikie gang type stuff with facial tattoos and scarring, and they're looking a little bit kind of rugged, you're probably going to be a little bit concerned about approaching them because you're thinking that they're a little bit morally different to yourself. Yep. They might punch you in the face, basically. Yep. Or just not be that concerned about the same things you are. And so, you sort of, you don't really care how intelligent they are or whether they remember their childhood. No. None of that seems to make much difference to you. So these researchers at the University of Arizona and Yale, they decided to investigate this hypothesis through a real-world clinical population. So a crucial element of the design was testing for changes in identity from the perspective of a third-person observer rather than the individual. Okay. So they found that changes on the patient's relationships with others is particularly important because when someone is not the same person, like the way they relate to their carers and their loved ones causes real damage. Yeah. Like, they have trouble like that. And that's a real effect of, on someone's life rather than trying to figure out whether they personally identify as one thing or another. Yep. It's like, So how did they do this? Well, they took 248 volunteers with family members who suffered from one of 3 types of neurodegenerative diseases. So we've got Alzheimer's, as we know, that tends to cause a lack of, mental acuity and memory. Frontotemporal dementia, and our friend from last episode, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS. That one. And that's the one about the guy's locked in and he's using his brain to control stuff. Yep. So each of these is characterized by something slightly different. So we know that Alzheimer's affects your brain. Frontotemporal dementia also affects your brain. However, they tend to undergo changes in moral traits things like honesty, compassion, decency, integrity.
Yeah.
Whereas ALS is mostly motor cortex.
Yeah.
They can't move their body properly, which causes, physical decline and an inability to interact normally.
Yep.
So then they asked these 248 family members or married, romantically involved, people.
Yeah.
To rate these 30 traits since the disease began. And 15 of them were related to morality and 15 to personality. Yeah. And to evaluate the degree of change in the perceived identity, participants were asked to give information regarding any differences in their relationship. So, for example, they were asked questions like, does the patient ever seem like a stranger to you? Do you feel like you still know the patient, who the patient is? So they had a look there, and you can guess, you probably guess where this is headed. But basically, the perceived greatest disruptions in patients' identity was when there were changes in moral traits.
Yeah, right.
So cognitive deficits, like seen with amnesia or what have you, didn't really seem to make a difference with the way people perceive them. They're just like, I don't remember my phone number. I can't remember where I live.
Yeah.
But, do you like puppies? Oh, yes, I like puppies.
Yeah.
Oh, you are a nice person.
Yeah.
Because all nice people like puppies. Best when they're slow roasted. Drizzled with honey.
Of course, yeah.
Delicious.
Tasty.
Yes. Okay, likewise, ALS, which is mostly, motor neuron problems, they were still perceived as the same person. Right. Which is nice. But borrowed frontotemporal dementia, they had the tendency to deteriorate their morality, that they tend to lie more, or they'll actually just start really telling the truth.
Yeah.
Well, and suddenly people confronted with this, and they're going, oh my goodness me, this is not the same person I used to know. They used to be so diplomatic and pleasant. This person is a little bit rough.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the important thing of this, of course, is if we're going to come across people with Alzheimer's, sometimes they do have changes in their morality. Yeah. Or with the other dementia, the idea is that we can treat them on a psychotherapy style level as looking at these moralities. So listing what do they feel is important, what's their integrity like, and understanding that those are the things that really matter to people. And so I was thinking, in this movie, they've thrown memories into Rachel about, spiders and about her mum and so forth in an effort to understand emotions better. But this research is sort of suggesting that maybe actually their identity is primarily based around what their morality is. Yeah. So perhaps they should have given their replicants morality instead of just memories.
Yeah.
Mind you, that would make very poor soldiers.
That's right. But Roy kind of develops that, doesn't he, in a way?
I just want to clarify, I don't believe that soldiers are immoral people. I just feel that if you're making killbots specifically to send off to murder people, which is what these robots were made for, it would be bad if they had human morality. Yes. As we've actually seen.
But why am I shooting him?
There are soldiers who have refused orders to perform, executions and push bomb buttons and things, which is nice. Yeah. Thanks to that Russian dude in the bunker who said, no, this doesn't seem like a good thing to do. This is going to kill everyone.
I'm going to stop that for a minute. Let's think about this for a second.
That's going to kill all my friends and family. It's going to kill all the other people. This is probably not the right choice. Thank you. Keep making that choice.
But that's the thing. So my thinking on what you've said there as well is that, well, Roy kind of developed to that point, didn't he?
He did.
Like, by saving Deckard, he could have just killed him, especially just coming off the fact that he just killed Pris, but he decided not to.
And that's interesting because as we see, Roy didn't really have much in the way of memories.
No,
he had a few years of memory at most. So, and he was programmed as a soldier killer. Like, he was not programmed to question orders or to feel sympathy for his victims. He was a bomb to go off. But without a full life of memories, he was still able to form a strong identity. Yes. And his identity was one that he loved Pris, and he came to appreciate the value of what life there is available.
Yeah. So giving him more time, he might develop more of those memories and therefore a different personality.
Well, that's the thing is you could say at 4 years, perhaps they just retire and go into other professions.
Yeah.
Because, they could be lots of other things. They could be delivery drivers.
Yeah. But I don't think they want them in this world of Blade Runner.
No, I think there's enough people.
Yeah.
And then the people are saying, now they're taking our jobs.
Yeah. And they're stronger. They can just murder people whenever they want.
I don't think that people who are strong just want to murder people.
No, I'm not saying people that are strong, but I'm saying their far superior strength makes them quite dangerous.
You'd end up with a Hancock situation.
Yeah, you
which
do.
is-
It's
you
going
got
back to
to
that.
watch that movie Hancock.
Yeah. And the same with what we saw in The Machine last week.
Yeah.
The same concept.
Same thing is you get to that one point where someone says, I'm going to be rude and bully you because I think I'm so good. And there's Roy just going, I am so physically superior to you that I could crush your skull with my hands.
And that's what happened with Deckard, right? At the end, like Deckard's a hunter of these things, and he knew he was in trouble.
Yes.
And he runs like a little mouse, like he doesn't confront him; he's running from.
Yeah,
and he's a hunter he's a Blade Runner. Like most movies like that, the detective doesn't run away. It's like trying to hunt down the bad guy, right?
he always has some cunning little plan.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean he doesn't get hurt and shot or whatever. But it's in this context, Deckard was like, no, I've got to kind of like go get reinforcements or something. I've got to get myself in a better position.
Up to that point, he just basically relied on the fact that he has a gun.
Yeah,
and he's a good shot.
Yeah.
I just didn't help
that
that
much.
much.
You shoot them dead.
So anyway, that's the science of
Awesome.
Morality makes your identity. So you might want to think then, if your morality is what makes you, what sort of person are you? I mean,
what are your morals?
What are your morals? What do you find important? And perhaps that's how you can change, even if you've got bad memories. Perhaps the way you can change is by taking a look, as this suggests here, says the new research is also important intellectual contribution to discussions surrounding the ancient question of what makes someone who they are. It appears it's not our intelligence or our knowledge or the past that defines us, but instead our moral behaviour.
Nice.
Essentially, identity is not what we know, but what we stand for.
There we go.
That's how you change yourself.
Interesting stuff. Okay, so that brings us to the end of Blade Runner episode 80. Let us know what you thought. Hit us up on wherever you're listening to us. Give us a 5-star rating or a thumbs up or a tick of approval or a review. All of those things can mean more people can access Spacebrains. Feel free to follow us on our website, spacebrains.com. We are .au, sorry. Yeah, and we are regularly on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. If you want to reach out, you should also hopefully post-festival get to see some visual content of us.
Yes.
You might have had, some sort of vision of who we are, and those videos are going to dispel that.
Yes,
Sorry.
we are built,
good or bad.
We're built for podcasts.
That's right. So check it out. They'll be coming to YouTube and probably some of the other channels. So stay tuned for that. Our next episode, will be
Chappie.
Chappie.
Chappie was a Neil Blomkamp.
Yeah, another Neil Blomkamp one.
I've seen it once.
It's another robotic one.
But I'm pretty keen to see it again because I seem to remember it was quite sort of charming.
Yeah, and look, we did District 9 a while ago, and good old Blomkamp is into his sci-fi. He's a full-blown sci-fi director, done numerous stuff, including that sort of recent TV series on Netflix. So
Studio, I think,
yeah. So definitely go check him out, and I look forward to talking about Chappie on the next episode of Space Brains.
See ya.
Bye.